I had been dreaming about finding a toilet. Anyone who has ever dreamed that knows how it ends. And even in the dream, I had that nagging sense of danger, the vague awareness that this was not a real bathroom I was looking for. That awareness was apparently not enough to wake me up, so eventually my bladder took matters into its own hands. I surfaced into a groggy half-consciousness, reached for the edge of the bed to swing my legs down, and found nothing. My body slid on what felt like damp moss for several long seconds, without ever reaching a floor. That woke me up the rest of the way. I forced my eyes open against the dazzling light and raised a hand to shield them, blinking through the gaps between my fingers at a canopy of dense, unfamiliar foliage, and at tree trunks so massive they erased all sense of distance. A patch of trees had started growing inside my house, I thought stupidly, and then a sharper thought cut through. Where was my house? I sat up, sleepiness scattered like startled birds. The house was gone. What replaced it was a forest so vast and ancient it simply did not fit inside any understanding I had of the word forest. The trees alone were enough to reset my sense of scale. The ones I had first noticed were enormous even by any standard I knew. But these were something else entirely. What I could see of the trunks ranged easily over 100 meters into the sky before the canopy swallowed them. Their roots erupted from the dark soil like the coiled bodies of giant pythons, half buried and half exposed, covered in thick green moss and forming their own jagged landscape that I had apparently been sleeping on. The bark where it rose above the roots was a deep greenish blue, crisscrossed with furrows so old and deep they seemed cut by centuries of ice and wind. I looked up until my neck ached and still could not see where the canopy ended. My bladder reasserted itself. I pushed aside philosophical questions about where I was and found a spot behind one of the root formations. And when I was done, I pressed a palm against the rough bark and felt solid wood, damp and real and smelling of earth and sap. If this was a dream, it was the most convincing one I had ever had. Then the voice arrived inside my head, flat and without warmth, speaking words that hit in rapid succession and refused to be dismissed. The announcement told me I had arrived in something called Dragon Ridge World, that my goal was to survive, that every person on Earth had been transmigrated here, that those under 18 had been temporarily sealed and the injured healed. It said there would be only one survivor within any 100-kilometer radius, that many special creatures and fierce beasts lived here, that the first 7 days were a newbie protection period during which fierce beasts would not appear during daylight hours. It said I could bind a tree as a shelter and that I should choose carefully because the shelter would be my absolute safe zone. It warned me of something called the tide at the end of each month, told me death here was permanent, and finished by informing me that every survivor could draw a random starting ability and that my newbie gift pack had been issued. Then, game start. I stood there for a moment processing all of that. Survivor, transmigration, another world. My house, my brand new house that I had paid for outright with lottery winnings and had moved into exactly the night before, was simply gone. The hundreds of thousands of yuan I had put into it, gone. I was an orphan and a sophomore college student who had scratched off a winning ticket on a dare for my roommates and spent the prize on the most stable, sensible thing I could think of, a home. And the universe had decided that was funny. I took a breath, then another, and let the bitterness drain away. I had been alone before and managed fine. If I had learned anything from growing up without family and working my way through school, it was that grief over what you cannot change costs you energy you cannot spare. I found the green virtual button hovering in my vision and pressed it. The data panel unfolded. Announcements, World Channel, Shelter Info, Weather Friends, Exchange, Backpack, Map. I clicked into the World Channel and found it already alive with noise, hundreds of voices arriving faster than I could read, the whole compressed chaos of billions of people landing in an alien forest. Someone asked where they were. Someone else pointed out that the announcement had already explained this, and asked why people kept asking. A third person noted that the announcement had been delivered while most people were still in shock, and that reading comprehension under conditions of existential crisis was not at its peak. Someone admitted they had transmigrated mid-breakfast and were already one bread roll ahead on the food situation, which produced immediate requests for trades. Someone was asking in English whether any Americans were nearby. Someone else was asking the same question in what I thought might be Spanish. The channel was every language on Earth arriving in the same stream, without translation, which the system had apparently not considered a priority. I skimmed it for about 30 seconds, learned nothing actionable, and closed it. The backpack was more useful. The newbie gift pack opened into 2 items, 2 pieces of bread and 1 bottle of water, a portable workbench and a stone axe. I took out a piece of bread, which was at least edible, then took out the workbench out of curiosity. It landed at my feet with a solid thud, a flat metal platform half a meter square covered in grooves and inlay patterns, and I recognized it immediately as the crafting bench from the sandbox games I used to play as a student. The resemblance was almost unsettling. I could see recipe prompts for a dozen types of tools, stone axes and iron axes, and military hand axes, though I had nothing to make any of them with yet. The system had given me a stone axe to start, which would have to do. The second item in the pack was a question mark, which turned out to be my talent, a card labeled Identity Roleplay. The description told me that each day I would receive a random temporary identity granting corresponding abilities and traits. possibly with restrictions or side effects, and that the identity would change every midnight. Random again. I had thought after the lottery scratch-off that random chance had nothing more to offer me, and here it was again. Before I could decide how to feel about it, the follow-up chime arrived. Today's identity was Resource Perceiver, which meant I could passively perceive all basic survival resources within 500 meters and see them highlighted in my field of vision as labeled dots. It would save me enormous amounts of time and effort. I stood in the forest and laughed out loud, a sharp sound that startled birds from the low brush. A radar on the first day before anyone else had any idea what they were doing. How was anyone else supposed to compete with that? I turned my attention to the dots already glowing in my field of vision, and the nearest one materialized into a translucent label, purple scale fruit, hovering above a fist-sized patch of red light about a dozen meters away, at the base of a moss-covered earth mound. I crossed to it in 3 strides and pushed aside the fern leaves to find a small cluster of low shrubs loaded with purple berries the size of longans, plump and hanging heavy on the branches. The moment I held one in my hand, the system fed me the description, telling me it was rich in water and a small amount of sugar, edible, with a mild paralyzing toxin that was harmless to humans. I ate one without hesitating. It burst with sweet and sour juice, and a cool mint-like freshness that cut through the dryness left by the bread. I picked and ate simultaneously, already scanning ahead for the next dot. Water source, the label said. That one mattered more than anything. I put the purple scale fruit in my backpack, watching the grid stack to 100 before filling a second, and then moved toward the larger red dot that indicated the stream. It was farther than the berries, and as I walked, the babbling of water grew gradually audible, building from background noise to a clear rushing sound until I pushed through a curtain of hanging vine leaves and the forest opened onto a small stream 2 or 3 meters wide. The water was crystal clear, pebbles and swaying aquatic plants visible on the bottom. The resource perceiver gave me its verdict immediately. Clear water, directly drinkable. I dropped to my knees on the bank and cupped both hands and drank until my throat stopped aching, then buried my face in the cold current and came up gasping and awake in a way that the morning had not yet made me. Finding a stable water source on the first day felt like breathing out after holding my breath for a very long time. The logic of survival runs in a well-known order: water, fire, shelter, food. I had water now, and food was clearly not going to be a problem for someone who could see every edible thing within 500 meters. That left fire and shelter, and of the two, shelter was the more pressing because without it I had nowhere safe to keep a fire. The announcement had mentioned binding a tree as a shelter, implying the interior would become livable, and from what I had read in the World Channel, someone had already said the internal space was proportional to the tree's diameter. That settled the question of which tree to choose. I wanted the thickest one I could find. The trees the system identified as Dragon Ridge trees were the giants I had been staring at since I woke up. They could grow 200 to 300 meters tall with diameters of 7 or 8 meters. The ones nearest the stream were thick but not extraordinary by comparison to some I had spotted earlier. I walked around for several minutes weighing proximity to water against size, and eventually accepted that the two goals were in slight tension. A Dragon Ridge tree about 300 meters east of the stream resolved it acceptably, its diameter visibly larger than the others nearby. Closer to 5 meters by my estimate. I placed my hand on its root. A prompt asked if I wanted to bind this tree as my shelter. I confirmed without hesitation. The bark surface began to emit a soft, translucent green glow, and then at about 3 meters above the ground, the hard bark seemed to soften, slowly indenting and reorganizing inward. The process took perhaps 30 seconds, unhurried and organic-looking, as if the tree were deciding on its own shape. When the light faded, an arched entrance about 2 meters high and 1.5 meters wide had appeared in the trunk. I stared up at it. 3 meters above the ground. I bounced twice, tried to grip the slick bark and slid back both times. The person in the World Channel who had drawn a tree climbing talent was currently looking like a genius. I needed a ladder, which meant I needed wood, which meant I needed to chop trees. The workbench recipe for a wooden ladder required 15 pieces of wood, and the stone axe in my hand was my only tool. I found a thinner, more manageable tree nearby and got to work. The first tree took 7 or 8 minutes and produced 3 pieces of wood, which told me the conversion rate was going to require patience. Each subsequent tree went a little faster as I found my rhythm, aiming consistently at the same cut line, driving from the core rather than just my arms. My palms reddened from the rough handle, but the number in my backpack climbed, and after several tens of minutes I had the 15 pieces I needed. I summoned the workbench and asked it to make a wooden ladder. It asked me to confirm consuming 15 pieces of wood. I confirmed, and 10 seconds later a solidly built ladder with evenly spaced rungs and tight mortise and tenon joints lay on the platform. I lifted it and it felt dense and sturdy, much better than I had expected from 10 seconds of production. I propped it against the trunk and found 2 grooves at the entrance that accepted its top rails perfectly, as though they had been carved for exactly this purpose. I climbed up, pulled myself through the entrance and stopped. The interior was far larger than the outside suggested. The tree trunk, 5 meters in diameter, opened into an irregular cylinder with a ceiling just under 3 meters high, the woody texture of the bark still visible on every surface. By any apartment standard I had known, this was substantial. I had a sense of having won something, though I was not quite sure yet what the game was. Air moved freely through the entrance and through 2 windows set into the tree wall on either side of it. On the right wall near the entrance, a display screen showed the shelter status. The screen told me I was level 1, the treehouse was level 1, that its functions covered a basic safe space, a simple resting platform, and natural storage. The upgrade requirements were 500 wood, 100 stone, 50 iron blocks, and 1 energy crystal, with a note that upgrading would unlock more functional areas and enhance overall safety. I noticed a line at the bottom counting down to something called the tide, currently 10 days away. I did not yet know what a tide was in this context, but 10 days was enough time to worry about other things first. My workbench had transferred automatically into the treehouse and embedded itself into the tree wall, which saved me from having to haul it up the ladder. Before I could fully absorb that useful piece of information, something else caught my attention. A wooden platform against one wall with a curved green pipe extending from it, its end drooping over the platform like a bent reed stem. I touched the opening and water came out immediately, clear and cold, forming a steady column into the platform below. The system told me this was the treehouse water source, formed by the shelter's root system drawing from underground water veins, with a current flow of about half a liter per minute, pure and directly drinkable, and that both flow rate and quality would improve with shelter level. I stood there for a moment with my hand under the stream. I had spent the entire morning walk calculating how to get water up a 3-meter ladder without a container that would not leak, and the tree had solved the problem before I finished thinking about it. The treehouse came with running water. It was strictly better than the apartment I had grown up renting space in the specific category of running water reliability, and the thought of that made me laugh out loud for the second time that morning. The upgrade requirement that caught my eye most was the energy crystal. Wood and stone were self-explanatory, and I could see paths to getting iron blocks through trading, even if the current prices were unreasonable. But energy crystal was a new term I had not seen anywhere else in the system. I opened the world channel and sent a question asking if anyone knew what it was and how to obtain it. But the channel was moving too fast and my message vanished instantly beneath dozens of others. I switched to a quieter channel by typing 6 sixes into the channel selector, and the space dropped to a few dozen people having actual conversations rather than a continuous stream of panic. No one there knew about energy crystals either, and the few replies I got speculated that it might be a rare treasure chest drop. I tried the exchange and searched for the term. The search returned nothing listed for sale, which at least confirmed the item existed in the system and could theoretically be traded when one existed to trade. Nobody had one yet. I made a note to watch the exchange for it every evening and keep the question alive in the quieter channel. The exchange itself was already busy for day 1. Wood and stone dominated the listings, people trading their first morning's labor back and forth. There were fruits, bread, water, and a few more unusual items. I was looking at it all with the detached interest of someone who had more food than most, when I noticed someone offering a pack of watermelon seeds in exchange for any food. Watermelon, the king of summer fruit, and exactly the kind of long-horizon investment that most people would overlook in the scramble for immediate calories. I sent a message asking if fruit was acceptable and watched the chat window. The name on the other side was Han Sung, which sounded like a woman's name. She had not replied yet, likely busy elsewhere. While I waited, I bought something more immediately useful, a fishing line, trading 200 purple scale fruit for it. The complete setup with hook and sublines was there, needing only a rod. A bamboo rod would be easy to cut from the small forest I had spotted near the treehouse. Fish and shrimp were visible in my radar already, swimming in the stream, but they were too skittish for bare hand catching. This would change things. I was still admiring my new fishing line when Han Sung's reply came back with a single short word, affirmative. I asked how many purple scale fruit she wanted, keeping my starlight pomelos and honey fruit off the table for now, since I had not even tasted them myself yet and intended to either eat or save them for something more valuable. She replied asking if I only had that one kind of fruit, and I recognized the signal of a buyer who had already been approached by every purple scale fruit holder in her local channel. I sent her images of the starlight pomelo and the honey fruit, and she asked immediately if she could have both. I looked at my carefully stacked supply and ran the calculation. Then I replied that I would give her one of each, but that she had to tell me where she had gotten the watermelon seeds. She told me she had found them in a treasure chest that had appeared right at her starting location. I felt a brief twinge at that, because I had scoured 500 meters of forest and found no treasure chest at all. But I accepted it and sent the trade. Watermelon seeds in exchange for something I could easily find more of felt reasonable. After that first trade, I went back to work. The resource perceiver identity would only last the day, and I needed to use every hour of it. I cleared out the treehouse backpack, then descended the ladder and turned south. I had explored east and north and west. South was unknown. The forest south of the treehouse was dense with the same mix of Dragon Ridge trees and smaller growth, and the resource dots were steady. I harvested a second patch of purple scale fruit, then followed a dot to a starlight pomelo tree 20 or 30 meters tall. The fruit hummed too high to reach, which was a problem until I realized I was carrying an axe. Felling the tree took 20 minutes and chipped the stone axe, but it yielded 7 starlight pomelos and 7 pieces of wood at once. 2 results for 1 effort. I made a note to cut down fruit trees only with an iron axe when I had one. I found shepherd's purse, which I recognized from years of eating it in dumplings at the student cafeteria. It grew in the shaded patches between root formations, the leaves recognizable even in this different world, and I used the axe handle to dig up 13 healthy specimens without damaging the roots, leaving enough intact to regrow. I found wood ear mushrooms and common mushrooms in damp patches near exposed roots, collected by weight, both species as familiar as anything from any mountain market back home. A bamboo grove east of the treehouse gave me 18 bamboo shoots. After careful digging, selecting the youngest ones that could be eaten, rather than the mature stalks that would eventually be more useful as materials. Beside the grove stood a row of low honey fruit trees I could reach simply by tiptoeing, small enough that the fruit came off at the slightest twist, yielding 9 golden yellow fruits the size of large apples. I ate one on the spot. It burst with juice immediately, moderately sweet, with a faint floral note I could not identify, but found pleasant enough to put the rest away with more care than I had given the purple scale fruit. I kept moving. The resource perceiver identity had a time limit of midnight, and I intended to use every minute of it. By noon, I had made 3 trips between the treehouse and my exploration route, using my jacket folded into a carrying cloth for overflow and the backpack filled. Sitting at the entrance with my feet hanging over the sill, eating a piece of bread while checking the world channel, I watched the complaints and boasts scroll past. Someone had just found a lake and was excited about the water supply, then deflated when a neighbor pointed out the treehouse came with its own. The thread devolved into affectionate mockery. I closed the channel. The afternoon was waiting, and so was the unexplored territory to the west. Following the stream westward, my dots filled with fish and shrimp labels in the water. Several fish of a size worth taking were visible, holding position near the center of the stream where the current ran clearest. I took off my shoes and waded in, ankle deep in water that was considerably colder than it had looked, and reached for the nearest fish. They scattered at the first displaced pebble, moving upstream in a coordinated burst that left me standing in cold water with empty hands. The fishing line in my backpack was going to change this situation. I put my shoes back on and kept moving. What I did find along the west bank made up for the missed protein: wood ear mushrooms in the shadow of a large root formation, more shepherd's purse, and wild Sichuan pepper trees with the distinctive numbing fragrance I recognized from the spice section of the cafeteria kitchen where I had worked part-time for 2 semesters. I stripped the small berry clusters from 4 trees, already thinking about what meat would taste like with these and salt. Then, half buried among stream pebbles, where the bank dipped to water level, a cluster of gray flint. The description told me what I already knew. Good for starting fires, essential in any survival kit. I collected all 14 pieces and immediately began working through the math of what I could get for them on the exchange. It was only the first afternoon. Most people had not yet thought seriously about fire, and by tonight the temperature would remind them. The first cold night was going to create a market, and I was holding the supply. I headed back to the treehouse before noon heat became afternoon heat, mapping the return route as a triangle with the morning's path to cover new ground I had not walked yet. Along the way, I marked every unripe fruit cluster I could not yet harvest, every mushroom patch that had nothing ready to take, every tree that would be worth revisiting in 2 or 3 days. The map function recorded every step I had walked and let me place color-coded dots at resource locations, which meant that even without the resource perceiver identity tomorrow, I would have a documented network of known sources to return to. The dots were going to replace the radar. The resource perceiver had given me 500 meters of automatic detection. Good mapping could extend that coverage indefinitely, one route at a time. By the time I climbed back up the ladder and spread everything on the treehouse floor, the afternoon felt like it had been genuinely productive rather than simply survivable. I inventoried everything laid out on the treehouse floor: 634 purple scale fruit, 14 pieces of flint, 15 starlight pomelos, 78 pieces of wood, 16 stones, 265 grams of wood ear mushroom, 560 grams of common mushroom, 42 shepherd's purse, 18 bamboo shoots, and 9 honey fruit, plus the 2 pieces of bread and the mineral water from the starter kit. The items that needed cooking: wood ear mushroom, mushrooms, shepherd's purse, bamboo shoots, I set aside in 1 stack. Everything else I could eat as is, which covered the fruit and the bread and water. The problem for tonight was fire, and I had flint. The problem for tomorrow was that I would no longer have the resource perceiver radar, and I had the map. The problem for the next week was iron blocks and energy crystals, and I had flint to trade for one and a plan forming for the other. For the first full day in Dragon Ridge World, none of these problems felt unmanageable. The treehouse was real, and the water ran, and the food was sufficient. Tomorrow I would make the flint trades and watch who was buying, because the people with the most desperate need for fire tonight were the people who would have the most interest in trading tomorrow morning. The position was good. The thought of what I could do with that flint on the exchange once the night's cold had run its argument made it feel even better. Several categories needed heat before they were edible. wood ear mushroom especially, so my practical menu was narrower than the full inventory implied. But the fruit was substantial, and I had real variety, which was more than most people in the channel could say. The honey fruit was new to me. I ate one while doing inventory and understood immediately why I had been right to keep it back from the Hansong trade. Impossibly juicy, golden bright sweetness without cloying weight, the peel smelling faintly of something between citrus and vanilla. I set 3 aside for myself and reconsidered my trading strategy around the rest. The World Channel at noon had a moment that crystallized the gap between my situation and everyone else's. Someone posted a photo of themselves grilling small river fish over a fire they had started by rubbing sticks together. The fish tiny but clearly cooked through, and the response from the channel was genuine sustained envy. People asking how they had managed the fire, how they had caught the fish, whether they had more. I looked at the roast chicken still in my backpack and decided not to post anything yet. The flint in my inventory was more immediately useful as a trading asset than as a conversation starter. By the time the cold arrived tonight, people would understand what fire was worth. The channel was also running discussions about talent abilities, and I mostly lurked. The person with fishing mastery was lamenting having no fishing rod. The lumberjack had chopped 700 pieces of wood in a morning, while someone else had gotten 80. Night vision was only useful in the dark, which was also when you were most likely to die if you went outside. Tree climbing was suddenly looking prescient. I thought about these distribution outcomes, and the way certain talents only revealed their value in specific conditions, and felt a new appreciation for the resource perceiver I had used all day. A radar in the first week, when resources were the limiting factor, was almost unfairly good. I spent the afternoon pushing further from the treehouse than I had gone before, heading east and then south. The map marked everything. My primary target was not more fruit, which I already had in abundance, but new resource types. What I found included wild blueberries slightly sour and perfectly acceptable, more wood ear mushrooms in a new patch near exposed root formations, and one item that genuinely delighted me, flint, scattered across a stream bed about 2 kilometers out. I already had 14 pieces from the morning, but more was better given what I planned to do with it. I also discovered following the stream east that the waterway widened as it went, the current slowing and the channel deepening. About an hour of walking downstream, the trees thinned and the sound changed, and I pushed through curtaining vines to find a waterfall pool. The waterfall itself came down from well above, mist catching the afternoon light and throwing a rainbow. Below it was a pool large enough that I could not see the far bank clearly, clear to the bottom, teeming with fish that showed as dozens of overlapping dots in my perception. And beneath all the fish labels, sitting on the pool floor was a different kind of dot with a different quality of glow. A treasure chest. Level 2. I stripped to my underwear on the bank, swam out over the chest location, took a breath, and dived. The depth was manageable, the water sharp cold, and I got both hands around the chest and kicked back to the surface without difficulty. On the bank, I opened it without bothering to dress first, water dripping from my hair onto the chest lid. Inside, a roast chicken, golden and carrying the smell of real seasoning even here. An iron axe with a heavier, more balanced feel than the stone one. A small folding fruit knife. A wicker chair blueprint, and a backpack upgrade crystal listed as a special item. The backpack upgrade crystal was the most immediately valuable of the 5. I used it on the spot, watching my backpack capacity jump from 10 to 20 slots with a chime that felt like it deserved more fanfare than it got. 20 slots was going to change every subsequent collection trip. I dismantled the chest itself on impulse and got 12 pieces of wood, 8 iron nails, and 3 copper pieces, all metal and therefore all precious in a world where the only sources were treasure chests. The wicker chair blueprint went into my inventory without my looking at it twice, because anything marked as a blueprint was worth holding on to. The roast chicken went into the backpack to save for dinner. The iron axe replaced the stone axe on the spot, and on the first tree I tried it, the difference was so dramatic, I spent a moment just feeling the balance of the tool before going on. The stone axe had taken 7 minutes to fell a thin tree. The iron axe was going to change my daily output completely. Back at the treehouse before dark, I arranged the roast chicken for a photograph. The golden bird in the center, purple scale fruit and sliced starlight pomelo arranged around it. The star-shaped pulp of the pomelo crystal clear and gleaming by firelight. It looked better than anything I had eaten in my first 2 days as a college student who bought his own groceries. I posted the image to the channel without a caption and waited. The response came in about 4 seconds. A rolling wave of disbelief, envy, questions, and one person flatly accusing me of hacking the game. Multiple people pointed out that the person at the top of the resource gathering leaderboard was named Jin Su and suggested it was probably the same person. Someone asked what that first fruit was and whether I was trading any. I received private messages in a steady stream and declined them all. One message was from Hansung, her tone flat and pointed, asking whether I was in fact the top-ranked survivor on the resource gathering list. I replied with something technically ambiguous, and she called it boring. I ate the roast chicken while the channel argument ran, which was the right order of priorities. Late that evening, the World Channel announced that a survivor named Jiang Guang had hunted the first fierce beast and that the rankings list function had been enabled, with monthly reward settlements at the end of each month. The announcement was cheerful and slightly mocking in tone, inviting everyone to check their rankings. I clicked in and found 5 categories: fierce beast hunting, treehouse construction, resource gathering, exploration progress, and illustrated compendium. Zhang Guang led the fierce beast hunting list alone at 200 points, which meant he had gone outside after dark on the very first night and successfully killed something. The implication sat with me for a moment. Whatever the fierce beasts were, the roar I had heard had sounded like a large predator, and this person had gone toward it deliberately and won. The treehouse construction ranking was led by Na Wan with 254 points, which told me someone had been building aggressively and had facilities I had not yet constructed. My own score of 100, from the bound treehouse and the ladder, put me in the middle of the distribution that included millions of people all sitting at roughly the same starting value. The resource gathering leaderboard had my name at the top with 12,544 points. Ha Waiho was second and Gang Gay was third. The detailed breakdown confirmed the structure. 1 purple scale fruit was 1 point, 1 honey fruit was 100 points, and a level 2 treasure chest counted as 3,000 points as a whole. Resources acquired through the exchange did not count, only what I had gathered with my own hands. The math added up clearly to why I was first. The Lucky Koi identity was still active for the next morning, and I intended to use it well. The illustrated compendium was empty for me, which was a mild embarrassment given that some people on the list already had 2 or 3 cards. From the channel discussion, I pieced together the mechanism. Cards dropped occasionally when collecting items, not guaranteed, and collecting 10 cards in a single category completed a row and yielded a gift package from the slot behind it. The probability of any individual collection producing a card was small, and the set threshold was high. I had gathered more than almost anyone and still had 0, which was either bad luck or just the math of small probabilities applied to large volumes. It would come with time. I made a note to pay more attention and moved on. Far from me, at her own treehouse, Han Sung was already rethinking the honey fruit trade. She had eaten it the moment it arrived, rinsed it quickly, and bitten through the skin into a flood of juice unlike anything she had tasted in 2 days of bread and purple scale fruit. The sweetness was real, not the thin sweet and sour of the berries, but full and round with something floral underneath. She sat for a while afterward, replaying the texture and the flavor, and concluded that wherever I had found these fruits there were almost certainly more of them. Her talent, which she had used to duplicate a level 1 treasure chest she found in the bushes, had given her twice the loot from that one chest, including the iron nails and copper pieces she was currently sitting on. She was not struggling for survival. She was bored and hungry for something good to eat, which was a different problem, and the honey fruit had made it worse by showing her what was possible. Han Sung sent a message asking whether I was the person at the top of the resource gathering leaderboard. I gave an ambiguous answer. She called it boring. The conversation closed there, brief and exact, which matched the impression I had formed of her from our trading interactions. I was not going to give her information she could use to negotiate with, but I also found myself vaguely looking forward to the next exchange. She was direct in a way that most people in the channel were not, which made her easy to think about without wasting time wondering what she actually meant. I also needed to check whether the exchange had anything offering iron blocks. Some people had found them from treasure chests and were selling at the prices of people who understood scarcity. I browsed for a while, shaking my head at the margins being asked, and decided to wait. The overnight cold would drive more trading and more items onto the market. By morning, some people might be more motivated to negotiate. I spent the rest of the evening building. A wooden bed from wood, tall enough off the ground to count as a bed rather than a platform. A table, a chair. The mortise and tenon joinery needed only wood, and the workbench handled the fabrication in seconds, each piece emerging from the white light of the crafting process fully formed and solid. The construction ranking ticked forward with each addition. Furniture seemed to be worth a meaningful number of points, the bed adding 40, and the table and chair adding 30 each. It was not going to put me near Na Wan on the treehouse ranking, but it was progress. And more than that, the room felt like somewhere a person actually lived rather than an empty cylinder. The bonfire gave the room warmth, and the glow from the control panel display added to it. I packed extra wood against the low edges of the makeshift door where the cold air was getting in, and the draft dropped considerably. Outside, the temperature was falling fast, as it had the night before. The World Channel reflected this in real time. Complaints about cold appearing in surging waves, people offering increasingly generous trades for anything warm. Someone who had transmigrated mid-shower and arrived without clothing asked for banana leaves and received mockery instead of help. Someone else posted a photo of themselves in a homemade leaf garment, described it as limited edition handmade haute couture, and got an enthusiastic following. The absurdity of the conversation was a genuine comfort. Billions of people had been ripped out of their lives and dropped into a survival world, and the majority of them were apparently using their first free evening to develop fashion brands. Then the sound arrived from outside, low and resonant, rolling through the forest and vibrating slightly in the wooden walls of the treehouse. A deep territorial call, something large and confident. The World Channel erupted immediately, people confirming that yes, fierce beasts were real, yes they were outside, yes they sounded exactly like that. Someone who had nearly not made it back in time described running through the forest at full speed, not daring to look back, hearing something following in a distance. I looked out the window into the absolute darkness below the canopy and saw nothing. The sound came again from somewhere north, then again from further east. More than one of them, and they were not coming closer to the treehouse. The treehouse was safe. The announcement had said so explicitly that the shelter could defend against fierce beasts, and the walls around me gave no sign of stress or instability. I was not afraid, but the newbie protection period was 7 days, and after that the daylight hours would no longer be safe either. I needed weapons that were actually effective, and I needed to practice with them. I ate the remaining chicken slowly, thinking about this, and watched the channel run through its variations on tonight's theme. Who had heard what? Who had nearly been caught? Who was comparing their situation to various horror scenarios? The channel was warm and human and completely inappropriate for the actual danger outside, and I liked it for exactly that reason. It reminded me that I was not alone in this world, even if I was alone in my 100-kilometer radius. Browsing the exchange in the meantime, I found the first interesting surprise. Cards were listed for consignment. A purple scale fruit card, similar in appearance to what I had been told about, offered for 10 iron blocks. I had not known cards were tradable. I stared at the listing for a moment, calculating whether it was worth it. 1 card toward a set of 10, the set yielding a gift package of unknown value, at a cost of 10 iron blocks which I could not currently afford. While I was thinking, the card sold to someone else. Whoever had bought it had more iron blocks than I did and was willing to spend them on a collectible. I made a note that the illustrated compendium economy was real and would probably become increasingly important later. I stayed awake until midnight, which required real effort. The fire burned lower and I added wood twice, and at one point I stood at the water tap and pressed cold water against my face to push the drowsiness back. The identity changed every midnight and I refused to go to sleep before seeing what I would be tomorrow. The channel thinned out as people fell asleep, their hunger and accumulated fatigue overcoming the attraction of the conversation. When the midnight chime came, the announcement was immediate. Lucky Koi. The description told me I possessed extremely high luck, was blessed by good fortune, that good things might happen at any time, that wishes came true and unexpected wealth fell from the sky. I read the last phrase twice. The resource perceiver had been active and directed, a tool I wielded consciously. The lucky koi was different in kind, passive and unpredictable, with no ceiling stated on what it might deliver. I did not ask for anything specific. I just went to sleep with that phrase sitting in my chest like something warm, and the next morning proved that it had been listening. Day 3 started before I had taken my first deliberate step. Climbing down the ladder in the morning, I had not yet reached the ground when my foot found an obstacle. A level 1 treasure chest wedged between root formations at the base of the ladder. White-gray, compact, and the system noted it had a very small chance of producing rare items. I opened it there on the ladder rungs, a lighter, a thick quilt, and an energy crystal. The energy crystal, the last missing piece for the treehouse upgrade, the one item I had been unable to source at any price, had appeared overnight in the lowest grade treasure chest, found on my doorstep without any effort. I held it in my palm and looked at it for a moment with a feeling that sat between gratitude and mild shock. Everything went upstairs immediately. The quilt onto the bed, the lighter into my pocket. I looked at the upgrade requirements now. Wood 500 and I had 854. Stone 100 and I had 135. Energy crystal 1 of 1. Iron blocks 50 and I had none. Still the iron blocks. But the target was visible now, and the lucky koi had 3 days left, and I was confident something would come. I ate breakfast and went out. Day 3 started with the lucky koi still active. Before I had even reached the ground, stepping off the ladder onto the root formation, I found the next surprise. A level 1 chest wedged between 2 root formations at the base of the ladder. White-gray, compact, with the system noting it had a very small chance of rare items. I opened it immediately on the spot. A lighter, a thick quilt, and an energy crystal. The energy crystal landed in my palm with a weight that felt heavier than the object itself. This was the item I had been unable to find or buy at any price. The keystone for the treehouse upgrade had appeared in a level 1 chest, overnight, without any effort on my part because I was lucky koi in the morning had decided to prove it. I brought everything inside, put the quilt on the bed where it made the room feel immediately warmer, pocketed the lighter and retired the flint permanently, and looked at the energy crystal for a long moment before adding it to the upgrade materials. I needed 50 iron blocks and enough stone to complete the requirement. I had the stone. The iron blocks were the remaining gap. I went out and followed the established resource circuit, working from the map marks now that the resource perceiver identity was gone. Before leaving, I put my remaining flint up for consignment on the exchange. The response was more than I had expected, the notification counter climbing past 99 before I had walked half a kilometer. The offers were varied. Most people wanted to trade wood or stone, which I had in abundance already. Someone offered 50 stones for 1 flint, which was not an equivalent value on any reasonable scale. Someone else sent a photograph instead of an offer, which I stared at for a moment with a certain uncritical appreciation before returning to the subject at hand. I was looking for things I actually needed: rare materials, seeds, equipment, or anything that would contribute toward the treehouse upgrade or improve my quality of life in a concrete way. The person who offered nutrient soil caught my immediate attention. The description I pulled up said it was rich in minerals and organic matter and could significantly increase plant growth rate and yield when mixed with ordinary soil. I had watermelon seeds. I sent an acceptance message immediately, but the reply was slow. While I waited, I continued working through the queue, declining redundant materials. The strawberry seeds I accepted without hesitation, which felt like building towards something. A hot pot base went in immediately after, because the concept of hot pot in this forest was emotionally important to me, even if I had nothing to cook in yet. A swing blueprint went in on impulse. I had seen enough blueprints to know that anything categorized as one was worth hoarding even if the current use was not obvious. By the time the night cold arrived and drove everyone indoors seeking warmth, my flint was gone, converted into a bag of salt, 3 buckets of instant noodles, a set of tableware, 2 bags of nutrient soil, a sun hat, a pair of shoes, and close to 1,000 pieces of wood from a single person who had been chopping trees for 2 days and was apparently nearly freezing. The salt alone was worth the entire exchange. In this world with no preserved food and no seasoning, salt was not a condiment. It was a necessity, and once I had meat to cook with it, the value of that bag would multiply. I was also pleased about the 2 bags of nutrient soil stacked by the wall, the seeds packed beside them. The garden would not happen this week, but it would happen, and I was laying the groundwork now while the materials were available cheaply. The jade bead fruit trees near the bamboo grove were the day's best discovery. Not tall, reachable by tiptoeing, with fruit that turned out to be outstanding, seeds the size of green beans packed tightly under a cucumber-shaped skin, sweet and sour and clean finishing. I was reaching for the last ripe fruit on the second tree when the chime sounded. The system told me I had obtained a jade bead fruit card and that the illustrated compendium function was now unlocked. A small card materialized in the air, glowing faintly, the painted image of the fruit centered on it. I placed it into the slot on the newly visible compendium interface and watched the card lock into place with a pulse of green light. Fruits, 1 of 10. The compendium spread out like a parchment scroll, most of it still covered in gray mist. Each category held many rows of empty frames, 10 per row, with a small gift package icon visible behind each completed row. The density of the card system was high, which meant a complete collection in any single category would take considerable time. But the function was real and I was now accumulating toward it. I continued east and south from there, adding new marks to the map, covering ground I had not seen before. In the afternoon, the stream I had been following came out into a clearing that opened onto something much larger. A pond, roughly the size of 2 football fields, fed by the waterfall I had found before. The waterfall itself was a genuine spectacle, water pouring from high above, mist forming a rainbow in the shifting light. I had already visited the pond for the chest, but seeing it again with more time to stop and look, I appreciated the scale of it. The fishery was extraordinary, the water thick with life, and the surrounding ecology was intact and rich. I marked it carefully on the map and moved on. By the time I returned to the treehouse in the late afternoon, I had a plan for the evening. The exchange was going to be busy, and I had things to sell. The cold was coming again, and warmth-giving items would fetch high prices, but I also had fruits in surplus that I needed to convert before they spoiled, and I had seen enough of the market to know that iron blocks were available in small quantities from people who had been lucky with treasure chests. If I traded aggressively tonight, I might be able to close the gap to the 50 I needed. I put flint up again, watched the offers come in, and worked selectively through them. Salt, more instant noodles, nutrient soil again, some additional seeds for the garden I was planting. The iron block trades were harder, each one negotiated individually, the sellers knowing their position. By the end of the trading session, I had accumulated 24 iron blocks total, still 26 short. I was not discouraged. The lucky koi had 3 days left and the momentum felt strong. The World Channel that night ran its usual late-night variety. Someone had made a deck of playing cards from wood and was entertaining themselves with solitaire. Someone else was advocating for a communal resource-sharing arrangement in terms so enthusiastic they could only have been typed by someone with nothing to share. I recognized that pattern and scrolled past it. The ones who were actually doing well were busy doing things, not posting manifestos. The channel gradually quieted as the night wore on. I stayed awake until midnight. The third identity arrived on schedule. Lucky koi, confirmed, for a third consecutive day. I lay back on the wooden bed under the new quilt and let the accumulated fatigue drain away. Tomorrow the luck would continue. Tomorrow I would close the iron block gap and take the treehouse to level 2. The sounds from outside were distant tonight, and the fire burned low and steady. I was asleep before the embers had fully settled. The cold on the first night was a preview. The second night was the real thing. I had the bonfire, the doorboards, and the thin short-sleeved shirt I had been wearing since the day I arrived, and the combination was sufficient but not comfortable. In the World Channel, the situation for most people was considerably worse, and the humor that emerged from it was the sustained, dark variety that people produce when they have no other outlet. Someone who had transmigrated while showering arrived without clothing, and had spent the day constructing garments from banana leaves, which by nightfall had reached design version 2.0 featuring a split hem and vine structural reinforcements. He posted progress images at intervals, each more elaborate than the last, narrating the development with the language of a fashion house announcement. The response he got was genuine entertainment. which I understood was the point. You either laugh at the cold or you freeze in silence, and laughing is more useful. The channel ran this kind of variety for hours. Complaints about the temperature mixing with impractical ideas for keeping warm, and practical questions about fire. Someone without clothing suggested burning currency as fuel, and someone else confirmed this was the single most economically sound use of paper money in Dragon Ridge World. The naked person thanked him and said he would start with the larger bills. Someone else asked what happened if you needed to reload the economy, and the channel devolved into a theory about whether the transmigration system had a GDP function. These were people who were cold and frightened and making the best use of the only tool available to them, which was humor, and I watched all of it with genuine appreciation while sorting the results of the evening's flint trading. My flint trades had been good timing. The items I had received, salt and instant noodles and nutrient soil and a sun hat and a pair of shoes and nearly 1,000 pieces of wood from someone who wanted fire badly enough to give away half their materials, sat sorted in the treehouse while the channel continued. The salt was the thing I kept coming back to. Salt in this world was not going to be findable on the forest floor. Whatever supply I could acquire in the first weeks would be the baseline for months, and the bag sitting in my backpack was worth more than its weight by any calculation I could run. 2 bags of nutrient soil were now stacked next to the watermelon and strawberry seeds. The garden I was planning was not going to happen this week, but the materials were accumulating toward it. I also built furniture that night. A wooden bed first, proper height, the mortise and tenon joinery clicking together smoothly under the workbench's 10-second fabrication. The finished piece feeling solid and real when I pressed on it. Then a table and a chair, both wood-only construction, each emerging from the workbench crafting process complete and sturdy. The treehouse went from an empty cylinder with a fire in it to something with the basic furniture of habitation, and that mattered more than I had expected. The construction ranking ticked forward with each addition. 40 points for the bed, 30 each for the table and chair. I was in the middle of the pack on that leaderboard, but I was not standing still. More importantly, having a surface to eat at and a flat surface to sleep on at proper height felt like the difference between camping and living somewhere, and I had not realized until I sat at the table and looked around that I had been treating the treehouse as temporary accommodation rather than a home base worth investing in. The exchange browsing turned up iron blocks listed for the first time for multiple sellers, all priced with the confidence of people who understood they had something nobody else could simply gather. 1 iron block for 30 purple scale fruits, which was an insult to both parties in the math. 1 iron block for a full bucket of instant noodles, which was slightly more serious, but still steep by any reasonable valuation. I did not trade for any of them. The lucky koi was still active, and I had seen enough of its pattern to have developed a working hypothesis. The identity did not improve the baseline odds of finding treasure chests. It moved the unusual outcomes to the top of the distribution. The level 1 chest at my doorstep and the large carp on the bank were both explainable, as unlikely events made probable. Another treasure chest tomorrow was therefore more likely than usual, and whatever it contained would probably be worth waiting for rather than spending iron block reserves I would need anyway. I closed the exchange listings and went back to the channel, which was cycling through a second wave of cold complaints now that the temperature had dropped further after midnight. I also found something in the exchange that surprised me. A card for sale, a purple scale fruit card offered for 10 iron blocks. Cards were tradable. I had not known this. I looked at the listing and worked through whether it made sense to spend 10 iron blocks, which I did not currently have in the numbers needed for the upgrade, on a single card toward a collectible reward that required 10 of that type. Before I finished the calculation, the cards sold to someone else. There were people out there with iron block surpluses willing to spend them on collectibles. I filed that away. The compendium economy was real and was going to become increasingly important as the world stabilized. Staying awake until midnight was a test of willpower on the second night. The fire had been burning for hours, the warmth was working against me, and the wooden bed was genuinely inviting. I added wood to the fire, then got up and splashed cold water on my face from the treehouse tap. The channel kept me company through the last hour, cycling through its topics. The banana robe designer explaining his vision for a third iteration. Someone recounting their near miss with a fierce beast in language that became more dramatic with each telling. When the midnight chime came, I was on the edge of unconsciousness and sat up purely on reflex. Lucky koi. Possesses extremely high luck. Blessed by good fortune. Good things may happen at any time. Wishes come true. Unexpected wealth falls from the sky. I read those last 3 phrases twice, and then a third time. Fully awake now. The sleepiness gone. The resource perceiver had been explicit and active, a tool I could direct and apply. The lucky koi was different in kind. Passive, undefined, with no limit stated on what it might deliver. Unexpected wealth. The words sat warmly in my chest. I was already looking forward to the morning in a way that made sleep easy. I lay back down and closed my eyes. The second day's identity had been a radar. The third day was going to be luck, direct and undefined. I fell asleep with unusual speed. Day 3 started before I had reached the ground. I was descending the ladder when my foot found a solid obstacle 2 rungs from the bottom, something wedged between the ladder rail and the tree root below it. I stepped down carefully and looked. A level 1 treasure chest, white-gray, wedged neatly between two root formations as if it had been placed there deliberately. The system noted that it had a very small chance of rare items. I opened it immediately. Inside, a lighter, a thick quilt, and an energy crystal. The energy crystal sat in my palm with a weight that felt significant given how little it actually weighed. This was the missing piece, the item that could not be gathered, not bought, not crafted with available materials. The core component that everyone who had bound a treehouse was going to need and no one had found. Delivered overnight in the lowest grade container at the base of my ladder, the lucky koi had made its argument plainly in the first 10 seconds of the morning. I went back up, added the quilt to the wooden bed where it immediately transformed the sleeping surface from functional to comfortable, pocketed the lighter, and looked at the treehouse upgrade panel. Wood, 854 of 500 needed. Stone, 135 of 100 needed. Iron blocks, 0 of 50 needed. Energy crystal, 1 of 1 complete. The gap was iron blocks, and only iron blocks, and the lucky koi still had all day to run. The day's route took me through the marked resource points in order of distance, starting with the stream clusters I had cleared on day 1. Along the stream bank where I had picked the first purple scale fruit bushes completely clean 2 days earlier, new growth was visible, smaller than the original clusters but definitely present. The berries already the right color. The world's ecology was restorative, not finite. I had spent a portion of day 2 worrying quietly about whether harvesting everything in reach was depleting resources that would not return, and the answer was clearly no. The same route could be walked again and again and would produce something on each pass, which changed the entire calculation of how to manage territory. I was not strip mining a finite deposit. I was farming a system that refreshed on its own schedule. The stream bank where I had found shepherd's purse showed new growth alongside the fruit. Even the wood ear mushrooms in the damp patches near the large roots had new fronds coming in at the base of the old cut marks. Everything regrew. I hummed something to myself on the stretch between the stream and the bamboo grove, feeling for the first time since arriving that the situation was genuinely manageable rather than just not immediately fatal. The jade bead fruit trees near the bamboo grove were not tall, reachable by tiptoeing, and I had been collecting from them methodically when the last ripe piece came off the branch and a chime sounded. The system told me I had obtained a jade bead fruit card and that the illustrated compendium function was now unlocked. A small card materialized, glowing softly, the fruit pattern painted on it in clean decorative detail, the seeds visible through the skin as if rendered by someone who had actually looked at one. I held it for a moment. The feel of it in my hand was different from the fruit it depicted, light and stiff, with a slight warmth at the edges where the green light was still fading. I turned it over, found the reverse side plane, then pressed it into the new interface that had appeared in the data panel. The compendium opened like an unrolling scroll, most of it still covered in gray mist. The clear sections showed rows of 10 card slots per category, each row ending in a gray gift package icon. Fruits, animals, fierce beasts, river fish, trees, dozens of categories spiraling outward into the mist, each one subdivided into specific slots I could barely count before my eyes lost track. I had one card out of however many hundreds or thousands the full compendium contained. The probability of a card dropping from any given harvested item was clearly very small, and completing even one row of 10 would take weeks at current rates. I filed away the compendium as a long-term project that would resolve itself through ordinary gathering rather than targeted pursuit, pressed the jade bead fruit card into its slot, and watched the slot light up briefly before going quiet. One down. The rest could wait. I had iron blocks to think about. At noon, settled by the waterfall pool with a piece of bread and a sausage and the channel running, Hansong sent a message. She was asking if I still had honey fruit. I replied that the exchange had some listed, noting that I was not the only source and that if she simply wanted to eat some, she had options. She replied that those prices were unreasonable, and that after thinking about it, mine was more cost-effective. I read this sentence twice. She was framing the trade I had offered on day 1, which had been genuinely generous because I wanted the watermelon seeds, as an established reference price that made current exchange listings look expensive by comparison. The audacity of this framing was something I found more entertaining than annoying. I asked what she had to offer this time. She sent a list. Wood, stone, purple scale fruit, iron nails, copper pieces. I read through the quantities and stopped at the metal. 16 iron nails and 6 copper pieces. A standard treasure chest dismantled, produced 8 nails and 3 pieces, and those numbers were consistent enough that I already knew them by memory. She had exactly double both figures, which meant either 2 separate treasure chests or a talent that let her duplicate items. I asked directly whether she had encountered 2 chests. After a pause, she replied that yes, she had 2 chests, which was technically true in the sense that both quantities of items had come from chest-shaped containers. She did not elaborate on the mechanism. I offered 3 honey fruits in exchange for the nails, the copper pieces, the sunglasses she had mentioned, and some wood. She accepted everything except the nails. I tried again with a 4th honey fruit added to the offer. She still refused the nails, with a patience that suggested she had decided their value before opening the negotiation, and was not going to move. She knew what they were worth, and I knew she knew. We settled on sunglasses, a fan, wood, and the 6 copper pieces. I was trading food for metal, and I understood that was the correct trade to make. I would have to be more careful with her, and I was also glad she was several hundred kilometers away rather than in the same resource zone. The pond was warm in the afternoon sun, and I had been sweating since morning, so I stripped to my underwear on the bank and swam a few laps, the cool water cutting through the heat and the accumulated tiredness of the morning's walk. I pulled myself to the bank edge to climb out, both hands on the grass, feet still in the water, and was pushing upward when a loud sound came from behind me, something large breaking the surface, and a shadow passed overhead. I dropped flat instinctively. Something landed hard on the bank less than half a meter from my right hand. A carp, a large carp, 3 kilos at minimum, golden and indignant, flopping on the grass in the position of something that had just leaped out of the water for no apparent reason. I stared at it. It stared back with the expression of a fish that has made a significant error. I pinned it down, threaded a grass blade through its gills, and stood up. The lucky koi delivering fish directly to the bank. I should have been surprised, but I was not. With the carp over my shoulder, I continued east along the outflow stream. Not 50 meters from the pool's edge, a rustling in the tall grass brought my hand to the axe handle, and then a wild chicken emerged from the grass, large and iridescent feathered, looking around with the blank, unfocused attention of a bird that had not yet registered the large mammal nearby. This was a genuine opportunity. Wild chicken meat was better than no meat, and I had been walking past birds all week that were too fast or too aware to approach. I set the carp down with extreme care and began my approach. Body low, movements slow, one hand steadying the axe on my back to keep it from rattling, using the tall grass and available shrubs as cover between me and the bird. 1 step, pause. 2 steps, pause. The chicken pecked at the ground, turned its head, examined something with one eye. 3 steps, 4. I was close enough to see the gloss on individual feathers. I judged the remaining distance, set my weight back, loaded the spring in my legs. My left foot caught something hard just below the grass surface. The prepared spring unloaded into empty air, and I went forward face first, both hands out, and hit the ground with real force, the carp sliding a meter away from where I had left it, the wild chicken producing a sound I can only describe as a squawk of pure offense before it launched itself into the canopy and vanished. I lay face down in the flattened grass for a moment. Then I turned to look at what had tripped me. A dark green treasure chest, half buried, its corner just visible above the surface. The wild chicken was irretrievably gone. The treasure chest was present and real. I sat up, wiped my face, and dug the chest free. Level 2, same designation as the waterfall pool chest. 1 meal of wild chicken, exchanged by the universe for a level 2 treasure chest. This seemed like a favorable deal. I put it in my backpack and retrieved the carp. The stream east of the pool ran through territory I had been marking for later visits, and the grass along its banks was thick and tall. I set the carp down to free both hands for the backpack adjustment, then went to retrieve it and found that it had been flopping independently while I was digging the treasure chest free, and had moved some distance downstream, leaving a trail of pressed grass that was easy enough to follow. When I retrieved the fish, I also noticed the depression in the grass where it had first come to rest. 9 wild eggs, arranged in a shallow hollow that the grass had concealed completely. The wild chicken that had escaped me had apparently been using this bank as a nesting spot, and its dramatic exit from the premises had not damaged the nest. I wrapped the eggs carefully in leaves and packed them into a padded section of the backpack. I searched the immediate area more deliberately now that I knew to look for the kind of compressed hollow that a bird returns to regularly, and found a second nest not far away, under a dragon ridge tree root with 12 more eggs settled into the curvature of the root, at soil level. 21 wild eggs total, which was protein for several days of actual meals rather than protein-adjacent bread and fruit eating. Added to the carp and the level 2 chest still waiting in the backpack, the afternoon had produced more value without any deliberate effort than I could have gathered in a full morning of directed searching. The lucky koi's approach to the day was becoming a recognizable pattern. It did not place good resources in front of me for finding. It arranged for good resources to arrive while I was doing something else. The return trip to the treehouse was against the clock. I had been so absorbed in the afternoon sequence of events, the carp, the wild chicken, the treasure chest, the eggs, the rabbit, that I had not been watching the sun. I looked up and found it considerably lower in the west than I had expected. The fierce beasts that moved at night had been producing sounds from further away for the past 2 evenings, but they had been getting closer each time, and the newbie protection period only restricted their daytime activity. Night was their unrestricted territory. I cleaned the carp at the stream downstream of the pool quickly and with no ceremony, the fish yielding its scales and internal organs in under 5 minutes, and then moved at speed toward the treehouse. The cleaned fish went wrapped in broad leaves inside the backpack. The rabbit was already there. The 21 eggs were nested in padded layers. I was moving at something between a fast walk and a controlled jog, listening to the forest around me. I almost missed it. Coming around the base of the Dragon Ridge tree, focused on the ladder above me, I nearly stepped on a furry grayish-brown shape lying awkwardly against one of the root formations. A wild rabbit, 7 or 8 kilos of it, completely still, not breathing. I crouched and examined it. There was nothing wrong with the carcass that I could see. It appeared to have run into the tree itself at speed and stopped living. An idiom from school, waiting by a stump for a rabbit. The story about the lucky farmer who found a rabbit that had run into a tree and gave up work forever. I had been walking past wild rabbits all afternoon that were too fast and too aware to catch, and one of them had apparently solved the entire problem by running into the base of my treehouse and dying. The lucky koi, of course. There was half an hour left before the sun fully set, and I used it. I took the rabbit to the stream, worked through the skinning carefully to preserve the fur intact, cleaned the carcass, and was back at the ladder when the first deep sound rolled through the forest from somewhere north. I climbed fast. The sounds below me were closer than they had been on any previous evening, the heavy footsteps audible in the leaf cover, and I pulled the ladder up behind me before closing the door. Too close. From now on, I was going to watch the sun with more attention. Inside, fire going, door secured, the day's catch arranged on the treehouse floor, carp cleaned and ready, 21 wild eggs in their padded section of backpack, and the still unopened level 2 chest I had been carrying since the afternoon. I finally had time to open it. I set everything else aside and cracked the seal. 10 iron blocks, a 5-liter barrel of cooking oil, a barbecue grill with a stainless steel mesh cooking surface, a full raincoat, and a compound bow with 10 arrows. I looked at the barbecue grill with a specific feeling. I had spent part of the earlier afternoon building a rack from cut branches and salvaged wood, which had taken 20 minutes and produced a functional but unstable cooking surface. The proper stainless steel grill, with an actual mesh surface and correct leg height, had arrived precisely when I no longer needed it to improvise. This was entirely my own fault for not opening the chest the moment I retrieved it. I had been distracted by the fish and the eggs and the subsequent chaos of the wild rabbit at the treehouse base, and had simply not done it. The grill was better than my improvised rack regardless, and I set the rack aside and laid the proper grill over the coals. The cooking oil was immediately useful and more than I had expected. 5 liters was months of cooking supply, and oil solved the problem of food burning on a dry cooking surface before the interior cooked through. The raincoat I checked briefly, confirmed it was full coverage, and stored it for the rain that had not come yet but would. The compound bow was a second one which I did not need immediately but recognized as a reserve that might matter later if the first broke or was lost. The 10 iron blocks brought my running total to 24, 26 short of the 50 the treehouse upgrade required, but the trajectory was clear and the direction was consistent. Each day's trading and each open chest were closing that number, and the lucky koi had 2 more days to run before it changed at midnight. I set up the barbecue grill and transferred the carp and rabbit sections to it. The rabbit had been butchered into manageable pieces, the jointing work taking longer than it would have for someone with more experience but yielding clean sections without wasted meat. I had gotten the fur off cleanly too, the skin intact, which I stretched over a section of the treehouse wall to dry because rabbit fur processed correctly could become winter clothing when the temperature dropped further. The cooking oil went on next, dispensed from holes I punched in the bottle cap with the fruit knife, a simple improvisation that let me apply a fine coating across all the meat surfaces without using more than necessary. The oil changed everything. Meat on a dry grill charred on the surface before cooking through, but oiled meat developed a crust that sealed the moisture inside. I added salt, working it in by hand on the rabbit sections, then the cumin powder from Hansung's trade, applied generously across every surface. I had enough cumin to use it properly rather than sparingly, and I did. The combined smell of hot oil, browning fish skin, and cumin hit the treehouse like a physical event and made my stomach assert itself loudly in a way that reminded me I had eaten only bread, fruit, and a sausage since morning. I closed the door against the sounds outside and focused on the grill, turning the sections when the edges showed the right color, adjusting the position over the coals as they shifted. Cooking properly required attention, and I gave it full attention. The carp was extraordinary. The fish had been completely fresh, killed and cleaned the same afternoon, the flesh white and firm, and the combination of heat and oil and salt and cumin brought out a sweetness in the meat that I had not expected from freshwater fish. I ate one large section immediately, and set the rest to the side of the grill to keep warm. Then I sent Hansung a grilled hind leg on one of the plates from the tableware set I had acquired through the flint trades, with a note that she should eat it while it was warm. I had been meaning to mention the rabbit since I found it, and the grilled version was a better introduction than the raw one would have been. Han Sung's reply came back as a brief and honest acknowledgement, 2 words of thanks and nothing further. She had eaten it immediately. I could tell from the timing of the response, which was under a minute from when I had sent the plate. The rabbit leg was the exact thing she had been hoping for when she reached out about honey fruit, and she was not going to pretend otherwise, but she was also not going to be effusive about something she had traded fairly for. Genuine thanks did not require volume. The carp was done first. The fish meat was tender in a way that I had not expected, the flesh pulling apart in clean flakes, the stream's cleanness and the flavor along with the oil and the salt, and a slight sweetness from the fat. I ate a large section of it and then moved to the rabbit, which was better than I had imagined rabbit could be. Fibrous in texture, but fully tender from the heat and the oil, the cumin sitting in the meat rather than just coating the surface. I had eaten roast chicken the night before and wild rabbit tonight, and I was living better in Dragon Ridge World than I had in my last 2 years of college on a budget. I sent Han-sang a grilled hind leg on one of the plates from my traded tableware set, with a note telling her to eat it while it was warm, and that I expected the plate returned. Then I photographed the remaining fish skeleton and the still substantial uneaten portion of the rabbit, and posted it to the channel under the caption that tonight had been a simple meal and bad luck, nothing special. The channel's response was immediate and skeptical. Someone pointed out that my definition of bad luck included grilled wild rabbit, fresh carp, 3 wild eggs visibly in the background, and what appeared to be a case of cola. Someone accused me of cheating in a world with no defined rules against whatever I was doing. Someone else said my bad luck meals represented 2 days of their entire supply and wanted to know what my good luck meals looked like and whether I would be willing to share the recipe for whatever identity produced this outcome. Several people wanted to know if that was real cola or a prop. I did not respond to any of it. I ate until I was full, which took longer than I expected given how much food was on the grill, and put the leftovers covered on a plate for morning. The fire settled to coals. Outside, the fierce beasts were moving, their sounds closer than I liked, and I was glad of the door and the height and the solid wood of the treehouse around me. In her own treehouse, considerably further from the Lake District, Han-sung had eaten the rabbit leg in 4 or 5 bites, finishing the cartilage because she was genuinely hungry, and then sat for a moment with the grease on her fingers, thinking. The first night's treasure chest ranking announcement had told her that the person named Jin Su was at the top of the resource gathering leaderboard by more than 2,600 points. She had stared at that gap for a long time. The second place person had a reasonable score, the kind that suggested hard work and a decent starting location. The gap between second and first was not reasonable. It implied something systematic, not just good fortune or high effort. The honey fruit and starlight pomelo he had offered on day 1, the quantity he had been willing to trade, and the casual confidence of his exchanges had all pointed to someone with a significant resource advantage she did not fully understand yet. The fish that jumped ashore on its own, and the rabbit that ran into a tree, if those descriptions were literal rather than exaggerated for the channel, suggested a luck-based ability of some kind on day 3. Her own talent, replication, allowed her to duplicate any single item once per day, and she had used it on a treasure chest she found in the bushes, getting doubled metal components when she dismantled both copies. The iron nails she was keeping regardless of what anyone offered for them, because any construction system that started with iron nails was going to need more of them later. The copper pieces she had traded selectively when the price was right. She was not in survival crisis. She had food and shelter and a functional strategy, and the honey fruit had been genuinely excellent. But she was clearly operating with fewer tools than the person at the top of that leaderboard, and the gap between their positions suggested his identity toolkit was considerably more powerful than hers, or simply different in kind. She would need to know more before she could close it, and she was patient about research. She set the clean bone down, wiped her fingers on a leaf, and went to sleep working through the calculation of what someone with a luck-based identity could do in days 4 through 7. The channel's reaction to my posted dinner photo had the usual structure: initial disbelief, sustained envy, practical requests for trades, a few accusations of cheating, and at least one person who had apparently been hoping for overnight rates for something that was now clearly occupied with cooking. I read through all of it without responding. I had eaten a roast chicken the night before, and grilled fish and wild rabbit tonight, which was objectively better than most people's first 3 days in a survival scenario, and I was not going to apologize for it by engaging with complaints. What I did engage with was the private messages from people offering iron blocks in exchange for the cola I had been photographed with. Several people had seen the case of cola in the background of the image and sent immediate offers. I went through them methodically. Most were offering food or basic materials, but several had iron blocks, and I accepted 3 trades without hesitation. My running total went from 24 to 37 iron blocks, 13 short of the 50 needed for the treehouse upgrade. I was browsing for more when I noticed a public message in the channel from someone named Gangi, advertising a treehouse module for trade in exchange for food. I clicked on it and read the description. A module that could be used to build an additional small room on the branched sections of the treehouse, with a connecting passage and expanded living space. The restriction was that it required a level 2 treehouse or higher to use. I was currently level 1 and 13 iron blocks short of the upgrade, but the module itself was the kind of item that I should acquire now, before the price went up, and I had food that other people wanted badly. I opened a private message to Gangai and offered a set of fruits: starlight pomelo, honey fruit, jade bead fruit. He replied that he only wanted fruit because he had been told food was what I had, suggesting he already knew who I was from the leaderboard. I was getting used to this. I tried adding a rabbit leg to the offer, then received a response demanding 3 more instant noodle buckets and 5 wild eggs on top of everything else. The number was so far beyond reasonable that I sat up from the wooden bed involuntarily. I had 3 buckets of instant noodles total. They were my strategic reserve for the worst possible days. He was asking for all of them plus 5 of my 21 wild eggs. For 1 treehouse module, I looked at what I was offering: fresh fruit that most people could not source, plus meat that was genuinely rare. I sent back my final offer: the fruits, the rabbit leg, 1 bucket of instant noodles, and 3 wild eggs. If he wanted more than that, he could find another buyer. and I was not convinced one existed. 3 minutes passed, then 5. I put the data panel away and packed up the leftover grilled meat for morning, watching the fire settle into low coals. I was not worried. The module was useful but not essential, and I had made a reasonable offer. Either he would accept it, or he would discover that the market for a level 2 treehouse requirement item, when most people were still struggling to bind a level 1, was exactly as thin as I had suggested. The private message notification lit up. Gangi said he would take the deal. I sent him the grilled rabbit leg worm, the 3 fruits, the instant noodle bucket, and the 3 eggs, and received the treehouse module. It sat in my inventory now, waiting for the upgrade. I planned to use it the day after the level 2 conversion happened. While waiting for Gangay's counteroffer, I browsed the channel, which had been discussing something I had not noticed before: the channel numbering itself. Someone mentioned that the lower numbered channels, the single and double-digit ones, were significantly more crowded than channels like the one I was in, and that different social ecosystems had formed there. I spent 20 minutes browsing channels 1 through 10 and found what might generously be called a marketplace combined with an ideological manifesto zone. Trading announcements ran on every third line, bulk wood offers and desperate food requests. Alliance recruitment was active, groups forming with names and rules and stated purposes, some strategic, some social. Someone was proposing a communal resource sharing arrangement in language so earnestly utopian that I had to read it twice to confirm it was sincere. Equal distribution of all resources according to need, collective ownership, abandonment of individual hoarding, immediate implementation required. I recognized the proposal as the work of someone with empty hands and grand ambitions for other people's full ones. It would not attract anyone who was actually doing well. The channel numbered with 6s was quieter, more specific, and populated by people I now recognize from recurring appearances. Tang Tian with the banana battle robe design series that had reached a 3rd iteration by now. Ling Feng in progressively improving leaf garments. A rotating cast of people who had been sharing this space for 3 days and had developed something like familiarity. It was more like a neighborhood than a market, which was why I stayed. Then a thought arrived that I had not yet worked through properly. After dark, I was confined to the treehouse until 6 in the morning, a full 12 hours. I was spending those hours on the exchange and the channel, which was productive, but the identity roleplay talent forced me to stay up until midnight for the reveal, which meant I was losing 6 or 7 hours of potential productivity every night. That was not acceptable long term. I needed something I could do within the treehouse after dark that actually created value. Bamboo, I thought. The bamboo grove east of the treehouse. I had been meaning to cut some for a cooking vessel, and there was also the matter of tools. Bamboo could be made into chopsticks, water containers, fishing rods, basic traps. Some of these I could work on inside the treehouse at night, while the channel provided background noise. That would make the nighttime hours actually useful rather than just a waiting period between the day's work and the midnight identity announcement. I was still working through the list of nighttime projects when the midnight chime came. I had been assuming the Lucky Koi would run for a 3rd day, which it had the day before, but the system pulled a different card. The identity for day 4 was Traveler. The description told me the Traveler accumulated mileage by walking and received survival supply rewards at specific distance milestones. Keep moving rewards follow. A dedicated interface appeared showing the goal ladder. 1,000 meters for a basic survival package, 2,000 for a practical tools package, 5,000 for a blueprint package, 10,000 for a rare materials package, 30,000 for an excellent equipment package, 50,000 for a special item package, and 100,000 meters for something listed only as unknown. I stared at the panel for a moment and calculated the distances. 1,000 meters was practically nothing, less than the distance from my treehouse to the stream. 10,000 was 10 kilometers, achievable but leaving no time for anything else. 30,000 was a long day, and 50 was the distance of a marathon, plus 8 more kilometers on forest terrain without paths. The 100-kilometer goal I set aside immediately as a category that probably required specific preparation and a very good day. But 50 was interesting. The special item category had previously produced backpack upgrade crystals and energy crystals from lucky chests. If the Traveler version was comparable in value, 50 kilometers was something to attempt seriously. Then I stood up and took 2 steps across the treehouse floor and checked the progress indicator. It had moved. Indoor walking counted as mileage. The system said accumulate mileage by walking, not search the forest for resources. Every step, indoor or outdoor, registered on the counter. I looked at the remaining nighttime hours in the treehouse floor, not large but flat and consistent, and began walking circuits. The counter incremented with each step. It was not dignified, but it was effective, and I browsed the exchange and watched the channel while doing it, which meant the indoor walking was not wasted time but productive multitasking. The mileage was its own reward in this context. By the time the light came through the window, I had logged a meaningful head start on the day's total. I changed into the new Jungle Walker greaves from the excellent equipment package, which fit differently from anything I had worn before. The grip noticeably better against the treehouse floor, and presumably even better on forest terrain. I spent the first minutes outside before the day's main route began on the one thing I had been neglecting: archery practice. I had a compound bow and 10 arrows, and essentially no accuracy. I set up a mark on a tree about 15 meters away and fired until I had learned approximately where the bow wanted to put each arrow at that range. Several of them came close. One hit the bark. It was a start. I retrieved the arrows, noted the adjustment I needed, and turned south toward the lake. The bamboo rat deserved a proper attempt, and that meant practice. Today I was going to walk as far as I could in the most efficient route available, while still picking up resources worth taking. The mileage targets were the structure around which everything else would organize. The first 1,000 meters came before I had left familiar territory. The notification for the basic survival package arriving while I was still inside of the treehouse. The basic survival package contained fresh bread, a pound of rice, and a large bottle of purified water. The rice was the most welcome item. After several days of bread and fruit, cooked rice was going to feel like a genuine meal, and I had a bamboo tube to cook it in as soon as I had something worth cooking with it. The fresh bread was noticeably better than the dry gray block from the starter pack, golden crusted and soft, which told me the packages were calibrated to quality rather than just bulk. The practical tools package at 2,000 meters yielded a folding and trenching tool, a sprayer, and a claw hammer. All three had eventual uses, even if none were immediately urgent. The blueprint package at 5 kilometers held a single item, a sky garden blueprint, which I read carefully. It described a vertical planting platform constructible on the outer wall or branches of the treehouse, designed to optimize space use and improve both aesthetics and food production. The requirements when I added it to the workbench were 50 wood, 20 rope, 30 clay, and 10 plastic. Rope and clay I did not have yet, and plastic was a mystery. But the blueprint was saved and the concept was logged. Strawberries and watermelons growing in a vertical garden mounted on the outside of the treehouse, accessible from a platform, serviced from above the forest floor, was a vision I was going to work toward systematically. Once I had a production garden running, food would stop being a daily problem and become a managed resource. At 10 kilometers I received the rare materials package, which opened to reveal a case of cola, a pack of chocolate, a box of cold medicine, a winter coat, and a bedding set. The cold medicine was practical value in a world without healthcare. The chocolate was pure morale. The cola was another batch that would attract significant attention on the exchange. The coat and bedding were preparation for the cold that was currently arriving every night, and would eventually arrive during the day as well. I had been pushing south through unmapped territory, letting the mileage accumulate, and the monotony of identical Dragon Ridge trees and ferns was beginning to have its effect when the canopy thinned and the light opened. By the time the 10-kilometer milestone arrived, I had discovered something significant. A lake. Not the pond I had been using north of the treehouse, but a full lake, the water extending to a horizon I could not see across, the flat surface reflecting a wide segment of sky. And along its southeastern shore, a bamboo forest that extended in both directions further than I could determine from a standing position. Enormous in scale, nothing like the small grove east of my treehouse. The ecological density around this lake was exceptional. Birds in the reeds and on the water, clear signs of fish life, open sky above the water that the canopy closed off everywhere else. I walked the full circumference of the lake, which took most of the morning and produced a total estimated at 10 kilometers around its edge. The bamboo forest on the southeastern shore was extraordinary. Genuine wilderness-scale bamboo that stretched in both directions further than I could determine. Inside it, the light went green-filtered and diffuse, the stalks dense enough to require winding through rather than walking straight, and bamboo shoots were visible everywhere, more than I could gather in 10 trips with a full backpack. This was the bamboo forest I had been looking for. My small grove east of the treehouse was a patch by comparison. The lake had water birds in the reeds and open water, several species of duck, egrets, cormorants, and what appeared to be mandarin ducks in the shallower sections. The whole ecosystem was productive in a way that suggested I should find a way to be here more often. In the bamboo forest, I also had a close encounter that ended badly for my dignity. I was moving through the bamboo when a low rustling ahead drew my attention, and I tracked the movement until I could see what was causing it. A basketball-sized creature with grayish-brown fur, using its incisors to drag a bamboo shoot into a burrow at the base of a stalk. A bamboo rat. I recognized it from the general description, plump and protein-dense, exactly the kind of target that was worth taking seriously. I retrieved my compound bow, nocked an arrow, took careful aim, and released. The arrow flew with real confidence directly into a rock approximately 2 meters from the bamboo rat. The animal disappeared into its burrow in the same moment the arrow bounced off the rock. I stood with the bow still raised, looking at the rock, then at the hole, then back at the rock. My archery skills needed work, significant work, deliberate daily practice work. I retrieved the arrow and marked the burrow location on the map. I would be back, with better aim, and I would be patient about it. By the time I came out of the bamboo forest, it was past noon and the accumulated mileage was 17,000 meters. I stopped for lunch on a small hillside, the first genuine slope I had encountered, and while eating discovered fire-tongue peppers growing in the shade behind a large rock. Wild pepper variant, the system said, with a pungent aroma usable for seasoning, warding off cold, and preservation. The smell when I brought one close to my nose was genuine fire. I harvested 165 of them across the hillside. Half would be traded tonight. The rest were going into my cooking supply alongside the salt and cumin powder. With fire-tongue peppers and Sichuan pepper and cumin, the flavor profile I could build around whatever meat I caught was becoming genuinely interesting. The 30-kilometer milestone arrived on the way back, the excellent equipment package appearing as the counter rolled over. I opened it when I stopped to rest. Jungle Walker greaves, a tactical arm guard, and a Tang Dao. The greaves were footwear designed for exactly this kind of terrain, waterproof and grip strong. I looked at the blister on my right foot and exchanged the shoes immediately. The arm guard covered the forearm in lightweight composite material that did not restrict movement. The Tang Dao was a proper weapon, balanced and sharp, the kind of object that changed the calculus of what I was willing to attempt. I swung it twice in the forest air and felt the quality of it. With this and the compound bow, assuming my archery improved, the fierce beasts were beginning to look less like an existential threat and more like a problem I was going to solve gradually. The return trip was harder than the outbound. My right foot had developed a blister somewhere around the 25th kilometer, and the remaining kilometers came with a hot friction pain that grew more demanding with each step. I stopped at the stream before the treehouse, took off my shoes and found the blister burst. Without bandages, I improvised from the sanitary pads I had acquired in an earlier trade, which worked exceptionally well. The padding and sealed packaging making them almost perfectly suited for emergency foot care. I had seen people use them for this during school physical training. The pain dropped to a manageable level and I made the last stretch to the treehouse at a reasonable pace. By the time I was sitting with hot water from the bamboo tube I had cut at the grove, making instant noodles for dinner with the dried fire-tongue peppers crumbled in, the ache in my feet felt like something earned rather than just something suffered. 30,000 meters in one day through complex forest terrain. I had walked more today than I had walked in any week of my previous life, and the excellent equipment package at the end of it had contained 3 items that together represented a significant upgrade to my capability. Returning to the treehouse with 30,000 meters logged in treated feet, I settled in for the evening trading session. The cola generated the usual enthusiasm. More people had iron blocks now, several days of treasure chests accumulating through the population, and the trading was competitive. I posted the new cola at a price I considered fair and watched the offers come in immediately, several within the same minute. The bidding from people who had been subsisting on flatbread and purple scale fruit and had seen cola listed exactly once before at a price nobody could afford. The fire-tongue peppers moved even faster than I expected. I had assumed spices would appeal to cooks, but the reality was that anyone who had been eating unseasoned boiled mushrooms and raw fruit for 4 days found themselves unexpectedly emotional about the prospect of seasoning, and several people offered iron blocks just to get a handful of peppers. I acquired the remaining 13 iron blocks I needed across 3 separate trades, and still had peppers left over for morning. By the end of the trading session, I had 50 iron blocks and everything else the upgrade required. While trading, I also continued walking circuits of the treehouse floor, the traveler counter still running, the remaining 18,000 meters between 30 and 50 being the last obstacle to the special item package. I was making laps of the 8-step path between the workbench wall and the window, which was not dignified but was effective, the mileage counter moving steadily while I browsed the exchange with the data panel in one hand. It was 2 in the morning when I accepted I was not going to reach 50,000 before midnight, confirmed the mileage at just over 38,000, and decided to continue tomorrow where today had left off. In his own treehouse, somewhat far from the Lake District, Gangay sat down after the trade and bit into the rabbit leg. He had been 3 days without meat, living on bread and purple scale fruit, and the first bite of properly seasoned grilled rabbit with salt and oil and what was unmistakably cumin hit him with the full force of something he had forgotten he was missing. He ate the entire leg, including the cartilage, licked his fingers twice, and looked at the clean bone for a long moment. He had traded the treehouse module for a meal and an emotion, and right now, with the taste still in his mouth, that seemed like a fair exchange. Tomorrow he was going to find wild rabbits or wild chickens if it killed him. The traveler counter had been running since I stepped off the ladder that morning, and the first 1,000 meters were easy, arriving before I had even left familiar ground. The basic survival package materialized as a brown burlap bag in my backpack, and I put off opening it immediately. Items that arrived as packages tended to expand into multiple pieces once opened, taking up space I preferred to keep for actual gathering. The basic and practical packages could stay sealed until I was back at the treehouse with room to lay everything out properly. The 2,000 meter mark came shortly after, the practical tools package blinking into the backpack notification log. Then, at 5 kilometers, the blueprint package, and I kept moving without pausing. The strategy for the day was direct. Cover distance first, forge on the way, and avoid getting absorbed in any single task long enough to fall behind on mileage. I had been thinking about the 50-kilometer package since the moment I discovered indoor pace and counted. The energy crystal, backpack upgrade crystal, and treehouse module I had acquired as special items previously all pointed to what waited at the end of the day's longest distance tier, and the special item category had never disappointed me yet. The first hour south of the treehouse showed me familiar territory. Dragon ridge trees and fern ground cover and occasional fruit clusters. Nothing I had not already mapped. I picked a dozen or so of the better purple scale fruits I passed as a walking snack and kept moving. My pace was faster today than on previous explorations, and the monotony of one Dragon Ridge tree after another started to press on me somewhere around the 4th kilometer. The forest in this direction was quiet in a way that felt different from companionable. There were insects and occasional birds, and my own footsteps against the root-rich ground, and nothing else. I had been alone since arrival, but until now I had been busy enough that the aloneness had no room to settle. Today, walking long distances through identical terrain, it found the gap. I resolved this by keeping the data panel open as I walked, which gave the eyes something to do even when the terrain gave them nothing interesting. I checked the illustrated compendium to see if anything new had appeared overnight. Nothing had, all the same gray mist over the uncollected slots. One jade bead fruit card glowing in its row. I browsed the exchange briefly but found nothing I needed urgently enough to justify a transaction. I closed it and kept moving, watching the mileage counter in the corner of the panel tick upward with each step, a small reward that made the monotony feel like progress rather than endurance. The light changed ahead. The canopy, which had been dense and even since morning, opened noticeably a broad gap in the ceiling of leaves that let true afternoon sky through rather than filtered green. My pace quickened involuntarily before I had consciously registered why, and then I pushed through a final curtain of hanging grass, and the world changed. A lake lay before me, enormous and still, its surface a flat reflection of sky and clouds, extending further than I could see across. After 4 days of moving through tunnel-like forest, the open horizon hit with physical force. A breeze came off the water carrying actual coolness. Several species of water birds moved unhurried through the shallows. The bamboo forest on the southeastern shore was the second thing I noticed, and it mattered as much as the lake itself. From where I stood on the northern bank, I could see it stretching in both directions further than I could determine. A dense stand of large-diameter bamboo that bore no resemblance to the small grove east of my treehouse. That grove was a patch. This was a sea of bamboo, the kind I had once seen in a documentary about Sichuan and never expected to encounter personally. Before I had even thought clearly about what I needed from it, I was already walking toward it. Moving inside, the light went green and diffuse, filtered by so many overlapping bamboo stalks that the sun became ambient illumination from all directions rather than a single source. The stalks were dense enough that straight-line walking was impossible. I wound and turned, following the paths of least resistance, and bamboo shoots erupted from the ground in every direction, so many that the only real decision was which ones were worth taking home versus marking for a future trip. I harvested what I could carry without overloading the backpack and left the rest, planting a cluster of red map dots along the bamboo forest's edge. My worry about having enough bamboo for cooking vessels, traps, and fishing rods was no longer a concern. The supply here was effectively unlimited. The 10-kilometer chime sounded while I was still inside the bamboo, the rare materials package blinking into my notification log. I added it to the backpack without opening it, and kept moving. The mileage counter was at exactly 10,000. Emerging from the far end of the bamboo forest brought me to the slope of a small hill, the first actual elevation change I had encountered in Dragon Ridge World. It was short, perhaps 70 or 80 meters at the summit, and covered in low trees I did not recognize as any variety I had previously mapped. No Dragon Ridge trees at all on the slope, I noted, which suggested the system had some reason for not allowing treehouses in elevated positions. I filed this away and climbed to the top, where the view opened further, the lake visible in its full oval spread below, larger than I had understood from the water's edge. The vegetation on the summit was low and sparse, and among the grass I found round berries the size of small cherries. The system identified them as simply berries, non-toxic, sour-sweet vitamins. I tried one. The tartness hit immediately, strong enough to tighten my jaw, followed by a thin sweetness that made the sourness worthwhile. I ate a few more and moved to the shaded side of a large rock near the summit, where something else was growing, half a meter tall, slender-stemmed, with long dark leaves and clusters of bright red fruit hanging in the leaf axils like painted decorations. Peppers. I leaned close, held one to my nose, and the smell hit like a warning signal, a pungent heat that went straight to the back of my sinuses. The system said fire tongue pepper, wild variant, pungent aroma usable for seasoning, preservation, and warding off cold, with a note about excessive consumption and severe consequences. I took the warning seriously and harvested carefully, working the entire shaded face of the summit where the plants grew scattered in the grass. 165 fire tongue peppers total, which was more than I could use in the current cooking rotation. Half of them were going to the exchange tonight. Anyone who had been eating boiled roots and unseasoned bread was going to pay well for genuine spice. Coming down the hill and continuing the circuit of the lake's edge consumed the afternoon. The waterbird count was remarkable. Common egrets and cormorants working the shallows, a kingfisher hovering above a small inlet before diving, several pairs of mandarin ducks in the quieter reedy sections with their ludicrously ornate plumage, ducks of at least 2 species moving lazily through the open water. Every species I could name meant eggs somewhere in the reed beds, and I marked every reed concentration on a map. The lakeshore also produced the regular sound of fish breaking the surface in the shallows, which meant the lake's fish population was dense enough to push up against the bank, an entirely different resource situation from the stream and pond north of the treehouse. I could not fish today, but I had everything I needed to rig a proper setup from the bamboo forest behind me, and the image of sitting at this lake's edge with multiple lines out while the mileage counter ran was going to be the reward I worked toward after the traveler day was complete. The circumference of the lake, walked entirely, added approximately 10 kilometers to my total and pushed the counter past 17,000 meters by the time I arrived back at the point where I had first emerged from the forest. I sat briefly at the water's edge and thought about the remaining distance. I had 33,000 meters left to cover, and perhaps 4 hours before I needed to be back at the treehouse. 4 hours of outdoor walking on tired legs through complex forest terrain would produce at most 12 more kilometers. That left 21,000 meters for the evening, which was achievable indoors if I maintained pace through the night. The indoor pacing discovery the previous evening had changed the entire structure of the traveler identity. Instead of arriving home at 30,000 and writing off the remaining 20, I had a clear path to 50, and the special item category had delivered backpack upgrade crystals and energy crystals from other source types. Whatever waited at 50 kilometers was worth the undignified lapse of a treehouse floor. Tonight, after dinner, I would walk circuits until I hit 50,000 or midnight. The target was within reach if I did not waste time. I stood up and turned for home, checking the blister situation on my right foot as I started walking, noting that it was beginning to develop its opinion about the remaining distance. The return trip ran the full length of the outward route in reverse. My feet, which had been fine through the morning, announced their unhappiness somewhere around the 25th kilometer of the day, a specific localized pain developing under the ball of my right foot that worsened steadily with each step. By the time I reached the stream near the treehouse, the pain had gone from discomfort to active problem. I stopped at the bank, removed my shoes, and found the skin had given way. A burst blister wet under my sock. I washed it in the stream water, then opened the exchange and searched for anything useful. Bandages, disinfectant, medical supplies, nothing listed. I tried a broader search and found sanitary pads which worked for exactly this purpose. I had watched students use them during physical training drills in school. The sealed packaging was clean. The material was soft and correctly padded, and the size was right. The price was higher than I would have paid at a pharmacy, but this was not a pharmacy situation. I completed the trade, applied the pad to the blister, and got up. The pain dropped from sharp to dull. I could continue. Back in the treehouse, I sat down for a brief rest before opening the accumulated packages. Resting first mattered, because opening packages required taking stock of what arrived, which required attention I did not currently have. I let the feet rest for 20 minutes, then laid out the packages in order and worked through them. The basic survival package contained a round of fresh bakery bread, a pound of rice, and a large bottle of purified water. The bread was the kind with an actual crust and golden color, soft inside, nothing like the starter kit gray block that I had been trading for rather than eating directly. The rice was what I had been waiting for without knowing exactly how much I had been waiting for it. 3 days of bread, fruit, and protein had not been hardship by any reasonable survival measure, but the thought of cooked rice was producing a reaction that felt disproportionate and was entirely proportionate, when I examined it honestly. I set both items aside, the rice for the next time I had proper meat to cook alongside it. The practical tools package held a folding and trenching tool, a sprayer, and a claw hammer, all eventually useful but none immediately urgent. The blueprint package contained the sky garden design, a vertical planting platform constructible on the outer wall of the treehouse, described as suitable for food production and space optimization. The requirements were 50 wood, 20 rope, 30 clay, and 10 plastic. I did not have rope, clay, or plastic yet, but the blueprint was saved, and the image of strawberries and watermelons growing in a vertical garden outside the treehouse wall, tended from a platform, was compelling enough to treat as a genuine medium-term goal rather than a distant fantasy. The rare materials package at 10 kilometers had been the day's most diverse haul. A case of cola, a pack of chocolate, a box of cold medicine, a winter coat, and a bedding set. The cold medicine was practical value I was glad to have before needing it. The chocolate was immediate morale. The coat and bedding were preparation for the cold that arrived every night with increasing authority. The excellent equipment package at 30 kilometers was the last I opened, and the 3 items inside it changed how I thought about the coming days. The Jumbo Walker greaves were designed for exactly the terrain I had been covering. Short boots with a dark matte finish, waterproof with soles that gripped without the flat slipperiness of my current shoes. I looked at the treated blister and swapped footwear immediately, noting that the fit was considerably better than anything I had worn since arrival. The tactical arm guard was a composite forearm guard that covered from wrist to elbow without restricting movement, the kind of protection that would matter if I was swinging a weapon near Fierce Beast's claws. The Tang Dao was a proper blade, single-edged, balanced, the steel obviously good quality. I swung it twice in the treehouse space and felt the difference between it and the axe. The axe was a tool used as a weapon. This was a weapon. The 3 items together changed the threat calculus. With the compound bow improving and this blade as a backup, the fierce beasts that had been making sounds below my treehouse every night were becoming a category of solvable problem rather than an abstract danger to simply avoid. The evening trading session ran alongside dinner preparation. I had made instant noodles with 2 sausages and 3 wild eggs, the bamboo tube heating on the fire. and I browsed the exchange while waiting. Before I had even posted the nightly dinner image, the channel had been asking where I was. Someone noted that the big shot who usually showed off roast chicken and grilled fish had been quiet tonight. Someone else wondered if the luck had finally run out. I took a photograph of the instant noodles, with the eggs and sausage visible and a cola bottle to one side, and sent it to the channel with a caption saying, "Bad luck today, only instant noodles." The channel's response was immediate skepticism. Several people pointed out that the instant noodles contained 3 wild eggs and sausage and what appeared to be actual cola, which was someone else's idea of a good day rather than bad luck. Someone told me I ate better in this world than they had before transmigrating. I did not respond to any of it, which was its own kind of response. The cola drew immediate private messages from people who said their 3-day craving had returned and begged for a trade in language ranging from polite to theatrical. I worked through the offers. The cola went at prices that satisfied me, and the fire-tongued peppers went even faster, drawing iron blocks from people who had been eating unseasoned bread for days and found themselves unexpectedly emotional about the prospect of spice. By the time I had finished the noodles and cleaned up, I had acquired all 50 iron blocks the treehouse upgrade required. I brought up the control panel and checked every requirement against the stockpile. The upgrade interface listed them cleanly: wood at 854 out of 500 needed, stone at 135 out of 100, iron blocks at 50 out of 50, energy crystal at 1 of 1. Everything complete. I had been looking at that iron block row for 4 days, watching the number climb from 0 across 3 days of trading, and seeing all 4 rows filled was satisfying in a way that went beyond calculation. I confirmed the upgrade without hesitation, and received a notification that the process would take 1 hour. 1 hour was not a problem. The mileage counter was still running, and the treehouse floor was available. 1 hour was 55 more minutes of indoor walking, which was nearly as valuable as the upgrade itself. I had 18,000 meters left to 50,000, and 5 hours before midnight. The math was tighter than comfortable but workable if I maintained pace. I began circuits of the treehouse floor, 8 paces from the workbench wall to the window, 8 paces back, the counter advancing with each step. The channel kept the exercise company. Tang Tian had posted a concept image for the 3rd iteration of the banana battle robe. This version with split hem design and vine structural points. Named Guardian, the fashion house language still completely deadpan. Below it, Ling Feng had replied with an image of himself in his current leaf garment, striking a deliberately posed stance, one leaf on the hem coming detached and revealing considerably more of his thigh than intended. The channel's response was immediate and enthusiastic. I was laughing at Ling Feng's completely unperturbed response to the teasing, calling it natural and casual and not bothered by trifles, while walking laps of a treehouse floor at 10 at night for survival mileage purposes. The contrast did not escape me. I kept walking. 5 kilometers added themselves to the counter without my noticing the effort directly. The channel had moved from Tang Tian's fashion presentation to a secondary thread about whether the banana leaf robe would hold up in rain, which Tang Tian treated with the seriousness of a waterproofing consultant, citing the natural wax coating on fresh banana leaves and the double-layer construction's drainage design. Ling Feng contributed that his current garment had survived 1 light rain and he was satisfied with the result. Someone else wanted a commission for a rainproof variant, and Tang Tian replied that he was accepting deposits. The channel's commerce had migrated naturally from survival goods to services, which was interesting to watch developing. The indoor walking became background activity rather than focused endurance, which made all the difference in what the body was willing to tolerate. The blister ached steadily, but the padding held. I was somewhere around 33,000 total meters when the upgrade notification appeared, a quiet chime different from the mileage alerts, and I stopped walking long enough to press the confirm button. The treehouse responded immediately. A low hum from the walls, not mechanical but biological, the kind of sound old wood makes when temperature changes sharply, and then a soft green light spread from the control panel outward across the bark surface in both directions. The left wall began to move. The tree was growing, or rather reshaping, its own wood flowing under the influence of the upgrade, as if the system were simply telling the Dragon Ridge tree what shape its interior preferred. A staircase formed, each step emerging solid and complete from the bark surface, the wood grain continuous with the wall behind it. The process took perhaps 2 minutes, unhurried. And when the light faded, I was looking at a staircase that climbed the interior wall to an entrance above, the upper space invisible from where I stood at the ground level. I climbed it. The second floor was not a separate room but a broad branching of the interior space, the irregular shape of the tree's trunk offering 2 distinct areas connected by an open passage. The ceiling higher here than below, the wood surfaces smooth and unfinished in the way of natural growth rather than construction. The whole thing was larger than I had expected, and better shaped than a human carpenter would have managed with the same materials, the growth following the tree's own structure, rather than imposing a grid on it. I stood at the top of the staircase and looked down at the lower level, the workbench and the fire and the bamboo tube, and then looked across the upper space, which had room for a proper sleeping area and a separate section I had not yet decided how to use. The treehouse I had described to the channel as my home for 4 days had just become something worth the word more sincerely. Before arriving here, I had owned a house, bought outright with lottery money, which the system had simply deleted when it moved me to Dragon Ridge World. This was not the same thing. But standing in the upper level of a Dragon Ridge tree that had grown a staircase for me, looking at the lake direction through the window, it felt like something I had actually built rather than something given to me. I went back down to check the control panel for the updated status. Level 2 treehouse, expanded safe space, 2-tier living area, improved structural protection, enhanced natural storage. A note indicated that the treehouse module I had acquired from Gange in exchange for grilled rabbit could now be applied to construct an additional small room on the branched section, with a connecting passage. That project could wait until morning when I had light. For now I had a second floor, an hour's mileage banked from the upgrade weight, and enough night remaining to push the counter further toward 50,000. The mileage counter when I finally stopped sat at 38,000. The remaining 12,000 was 12 kilometers, and the thought of trying to cover it before midnight no longer felt realistic. My right foot had stated its position clearly. The special item package at 50,000 was a genuine prize, and I was not going to reach it tonight. But 38,000 in one day, mostly outdoors through complex forest, was a number I would not have believed on day one. I filed the final push under tomorrow's objectives and went to bed on the lower floor, letting the upper floor sit empty for a night while the thought of it settled. The treehouse upgrade module from Gange was in the inventory. The Sky Garden blueprint was saved, and the second floor was real and waiting. Tomorrow I would wake up in a level 2 treehouse and walk out into a world where the lake to the south was mapped, and the bamboo sea was mapped, and the fire tongue peppers were stalked, and the tang dao was sharp. The bamboo rat somewhere in that sea of bamboo did not yet know that my archery was improving. The ache in my feet was genuine, but it was the kind earned rather than suffered. 30,000 meters of forest terrain in one day, a lake discovered and circumnavigated, a bamboo forest mapped, fire tongue peppers gathered from a hilltop I had not known existed this morning, an excellent equipment package opened with 3 items that changed the threat landscape. The iron block gap closed through patient evening trading, the treehouse upgraded to level 2 with an organically grown staircase and a second floor I had not expected. Tomorrow, the mileage push would continue from where today left off, the counter already at 38,000, and the tang dao would go on my back when I walked out of the treehouse. The bamboo rat at the edge of its burrow was somewhere in a sea of bamboo to the south, and I was going to keep practicing archery every morning until the outcome of that encounter changed in my favor. The system announces to the whole world that survivor Jinsu has upgraded his treehouse to level 2, first on the server with generous rewards attached, the chime firing 3 times loud enough to drag sleepers back out of bed. The world channel pivots from gossip straight onto my name, asking whether someone really upgraded on the 3rd day, whether I am cheating, whether I am the same person already topping the resource leaderboard. One survivor admitting he opened 6 chests without seeing an energy crystal, while no one is selling them. Under the curses and envy runs curiosity about the rewards, and a quiet resolve to grind harder tomorrow. It feels like the moment Jiang Guang first killed a fierce beast and unlocked the hunting leaderboard, the first to eat the crab drawing every eye. The other regions burn the same way, John in the America region swearing in capitals, Kim Minsu asking why it is a Korean again, Inoue Haruyuki marveling the top spot is not from his Yamato nation, Jack in Oceania cursing about being woken and demanding to know who the hell this Jinsu is. Channel 66666 goes quiet first, then loudest, because the name is theirs and an hour ago I was chatting with them. The feed explodes, people confirming I am their big boss, pointing out my avatar still sits atop both the resource and treehouse construction rankings, begging me for the crystal source, declaring their channel host the #1 big boss on the entire server. Not a single ping reaches me, because I am not looking at chat. I had not expected an actual reward for being first to upgrade, and the system has reached past the gift package into my body, a tremor running through my limbs, a fine crackle in the bone, not a break but a tempering my muscle fibers tightening and loosening as a feeling of abundant strength rises. The gift package itself holds 5 items, a backpack upgrade crystal that raises both capacity and slot count, a perpetual firefly core that gives the treehouse and every future upgraded space permanent fuel-free lighting, a treehouse module that adds a small room on a forked branch with a built-in passage usable only at level 2 and above. A universal card that after use lets me directly designate any card from the illustrated compendium, and a treehouse sentry providing a continuous watch on a 10-meter zone around the treehouse, viewable through the panel active day and night in any weather. I stare with my mouth open. I traveled obscene distances for one special item, and now 5 have dropped into my lap. The backpack crystal and module are obviously priceless. The firefly core saves me from sourcing copper wire, glass, and a generator, and the description suggests every future upgraded space comes pre-lit. The universal card is weakest, since firing it needs 9 cards from one compendium row, basically impossible short term. The sentry is broken, a surveillance ring with night vision so I can finally see what is roaring outside my walls. I think of Jiang Guang, the first fierce beast killer, and figure his package was of similar weight, and I wonder what the level 3 rewards look like. The treehouse itself has changed. The plain wooden door now reinforced with tough dark green wood, and the drafty seams gone. The green water pipe thickened and running noticeably stronger. A new locker is embedded in the wall beside the control panel. 30 slots, constant temperature preservation that slows food spoilage, killing my worry about wild eggs. I drop the firefly core and the sentry in front of the panel, and both vanish into the interface. A new switch lighting the entire treehouse from inside the walls themselves. No visible bulb, and a monitoring option opening a full 360-degree night vision feed. My sense of security maxes out. The status panel updates me to level 2, with a level 2 treehouse listing a reinforced safe space, comfortable rest platform, basic locker, natural water source, and a simple second floor platform. Level 3 demands wood at 354 of 1000, stone at 35 of 500, iron blocks at 0 of 100, plastic at 0 of 50, glass at 0 of 20, and an energy crystal at 0 of 1, with further upgrades unlocking more functional areas and raising safety. The wood, stone, and iron I can chew through even scaled tenfold, but the energy crystal is the wall. I climb the stairs, the steps lit by the new system, and the second floor opens up with the same footprint as the first, the middle split by an open-work wooden partition. The left half a bedroom with a wooden bed, the right half a study with a chair and a small wall-mounted board for a desk. From now on, I sleep upstairs. The first floor stays kitchen and workshop. I lie back on the new bed and feel like a man with a small villa. The wood firm and cool, faint fragrance unfamiliar. Then I activate the 2 remaining modules at the panel. Expansion done instantly. 2 new doors waiting upstairs, each opening onto a small 5 or 6 square meter room, hung on a thick branch, with 1 window. The first will become my bathroom. The second will not be a kitchen, since cooking smoke would drift into the bedroom, and the locker and pipe are downstairs where they belong. I remember the traveler quest I forgot, nearly 40 kilometers in. Quitting now a waste. I haul the quilt upstairs, then go to consume the backpack crystal, only to find the bag has already crept from 20 slots to 30 just from the upgrade itself, meaning future tiers will keep bumping it. The crystal then jumps it to 40, double the morning, while others run with 10. The mileage ticks up, and my face cracks into a grin. The new lighting carries every corner, and I have climbed to the top of the treehouse construction ranking at 10,600 points, where I had only a few hundred before, 2,000 of that from the modular rooms, 2,000 from the sentry, 1,500 from the lighting. Second place sits at just over 2,000, the gap more than 7,000. The portion truly built by my own hands is small, the bulk pouring in from the core upgrade, and the special items. My private messages flood again. I only open Han Song. She asks how I upgraded so fast. I tell her pure luck. She asks where the crystal came from. I tell her a treasure chest. She asks what changed inside. I describe a few basics anyone would see, deliberately leaving out the module, the lighting, and the surveillance. She lights up at the locker in the second floor. Her supplies are solid, only a few iron blocks short, but she has no crystal and is a long way out. Then she hesitates and asks whether any of the upgrade rewards were particularly delicious, and I have to laugh. This big gluttonous girl only has food on the mind. I tell her there is no food, and she answers with a small theatrical "oh" and lets it go. Channel 6666 is chewing on my upgrade, speculating about level 2, complaining I will not answer, welcoming a newcomer with the line that the channel is full of talented people led by the big boss. I draft a short message admitting the water flow is stronger, that there is a preservation locker, that the space expanded with stairs to a second floor, and that the backpack picked up 10 slots. The channel detonates. Someone calling for a net to catch the big boss. Someone gasping the space is doubled. Someone trying again for the crystal source. Someone lamenting staying in channel 1 when the upgraded big boss has been here the whole time. I answer a few, banking goodwill. When someone asks what the generous rewards contain, I lie that it is a secret. Mostly useless items, since the truth would turn half the room green, then send out the universal card as proof. The chat splits, some calling it awesome, others pointing out the conditions are impossible. One sharper voice insisting the first ever upgrade reward cannot possibly be only this and that I am hiding the rest. They are not wrong. The counter ticks past 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 49.9, and finally the system confirms 50,000 meters today, and the special item gift pack. I collapse weakly, joy pouring through me. I drove myself almost into the floor and my legs are limping. The pack flashes and resolves into a metal device the size of a tablet, the system labeling it a mineral scanner. Function 1 scans and identifies mineral resources within 500 meters. Automatically, Function 2, with manual input of a specific mineral, tracks within 3 kilometers. Exhaustion washes out of me. Since this is a treasure, a strategic auxiliary tool, the kind that decides whole arcs of the game, and I had been chewing on where to even find iron ore and copper. It covers gold, silver, copper, iron, quartz, mica gypsum, graphite, fluorite, plus rock salt, malachite, turquoise, agate, glauber salt, and onward. Diamonds and jade fall under it too. The first a pure mineral, the second a rock built of minerals. The 500-meter passive range is small, but the 3-kilometer manual mode stretches it. The universal card is no comparison. I limp upstairs, the treehouse paying attention to small things, light switches at the head of the stairs, and beside the bed. I fall forward onto the new bed, and fatigue closes across my senses, my eyelids dropping before I can roll over, consciousness sliding into heavy darkness. The surveillance feed downstairs keeping silent watch on the perimeter. Outside, the forest holds a deep and dangerous night, broken by the occasional roar of a fierce beast, while inside there is only my breathing slowing into sleep. The world channel is still going, mostly moved on from me. Someone asks what tomorrow's weather shows, and answers come back identical. 90% moderate rain, 5% light rain, 5% showers. Everyone's forecast the same. Someone notes parts of the world are weirdly synchronized. Someone else closes the thought saying that if only one survivor sits in every 100-kilometer radius and yet the weather is identical for all of us, the entity running this game is enormous. And another voice ends it by saying none of that matters tonight. They can only survive by his rules. The casual forecast tips half the room into anxiety. Talk of how a cold without hospitals could turn into a fever that kills. One anxious survivor announcing he will not leave the treehouse tomorrow, brushing off a tease by saying compared to the big boss he is already so far back that one more day means nothing. A few others sign on to skip the day, while smug survivors who pulled raincoats or umbrellas brag about opening more chests, while everyone hides, one with strong physical fitness adding that a little rain has never stopped him. Some unknown time later, a cold electronic chime sounds in my head, soft enough that worn out as I am, it does not wake me. The system confirms today's identity, the fisherman who never misses a catch, telling me every cast will catch something if I wait patiently. The wait time random, with the side effect that once I start fishing, I must fish 3 full hours or the entire catch is confiscated. The closing line sits in my mind like a small bell, wait not in vain. Reel in to gain. I wake up grinning, stretching across the new bed, feeling like I slept better than I have in months, dreaming of rounding up wild cattle and sheep, fresh milk every morning with a beautiful woman beside me. My foot does not hurt anymore, so I tell myself I can go out for a stroll, and only when I pass the window does the rain register dense and gray over the forest. I frown, wondering whether to bother today, then remember I fell asleep before midnight without checking my identity, so I open the data panel. The system tells me I am the fisherman, the angler who never returns empty-handed. I stroke my chin at the strange description, since I have barely fished beyond a handful of childhood casts. The lucky thing is I already traded purple scale fruit for fishing lines yesterday. The annoying part is the rain plus the side effect, the first identity to carry one, which makes me worry about every future one. I head downstairs in a much better mood, the treehouse alone enough to make life feel back on track. After a quick wash, I work through bread and chocolate from yesterday's gift pack, and check the weather, all-day rain with 60% chance tomorrow too. So I cannot sit inside and burn 2 days. But heavy rain means an easy cold until I remember the raincoat I pulled from a chest. It fits perfectly. All I need now is a fishing rod, which means cutting bamboo, so I put on my greaves and raincoat, grab my iron axe, and head out. The rain is heavier than expected. The forest churned to mud and puddles, every step a careful negotiation, raindrops drumming on my hood, vision blurred to a few meters of gray. It is my first rainy day here, and if today's identity let me stay home, this would be pleasant. The exchange and chat channel must be flooded with people scrambling for rain gear, and Banana Bro should be making a fortune off banana leaves since raincoats and umbrellas are rare while leaves are everywhere. Sure enough, when I check, Dang Cheon is out in his banana battle robe taking orders, throwing in a free banana hat per set, running buy one get one tactics from Earth to perfection. I reach the bamboo forest quickly, drop a straight slightly longer pole with one swing, trim the branches, and head back. At the treehouse I tie a simple line on. No need to overbuild for an amateur. While I work, I scroll the chat channel, louder today than usual, someone whining about no clothes, someone else asking for umbrellas and getting mocked, somebody gloating about a free holiday in bed, a third offering lotus leaves to instant takers, one voice muttering that if he could make money off people he would also be diligent. By the time I have read it all, my rough little rod is done. For bait, I will stick with bread, and any bucket from the exchange will hold the catch. With the 3-hour minimum and a half-healed foot, I cannot stand the whole time, so I knock together a small wooden stool. I pack everything, tighten the raincoat, and head down. My target is the small stream up ahead, with the pond to the north as backup. When I get close, the stream is unrecognizable, risen sharply, branches and leaves churning through a narrow channel, the current too fast for fishing. The pond is no kinder when I reach it, churned muddy by the waterfall and rain, debris on the surface, conditions that would make a mockery of an identity named Never Misses a Catch. Still, the wait time is random, so I decide to try. I bait the hook with breadcrumbs and cast the system pinging that fishing has started, warning me to last 3 hours or lose the haul. I dismiss it, since if I catch nothing there is nothing to confiscate, then reread the description and catch the wording, that I will catch something, not necessarily a fish, and I mutter that this is a bit of a scam, half wondering if I might pull up a corpse. After 10 minutes I give up. The fisherman identity is too rare to waste, so I reel in and start moving, because the lake is my only real chance. It is just past 8 in the morning, meaning 3 hours there, a few hours fishing, 3 hours back, all barely fitting. The jungle walker greaves help enormously on the slop, but 2 hours of non-stop travel still wring me out, only the promise of the lake keeping me upright. Finally, the familiar shore appears, raindrops stitching the surface, water meeting sky in gray-white haze, and right by my arrival point, a massive Dragon Ridge tree stands like a natural umbrella with the wind even angling rain away from me. I remember the childhood warning never to stand under a tree in the rain, but there has been no thunder since I came to this world, and if lightning did strike, my treehouse would be just as likely a target. I drag my tired body under the canopy, take out the stool, and tell myself dinner depends on the next few hours. The moment I cast, Han-sung messages me, my only friend and so the only one who can ping me without opening the panel. She asks if it is raining where I am. I tell her yes, quite heavy. She asks if I am holed up at home. I tell her no, that I am out experiencing nature's free shower while I break in a new rod. She is surprised I have one at all and would go out in this, then sighs at her own laziness compared to my apparent drive. No wonder I upgraded so fast. She mutters that maybe she should trade for a rain shield like the banana robe, then asks if I am not afraid of cold. I tell her about the raincoat and warn her not to come out without one, and she decides against it, since a cold is not worth it even with her medical kit. After Han Sung signs off, I notice Im Pung selling on the channel, and it turns out to be umbrellas, 2 wooden boards slanted together with a stick beneath, shaped like the character for person. Crude but selling like crazy because real umbrellas cannot be crafted by hand. What I want to know most is where he found so many iron nails. The Dragon Ridge tree blocks rain overhead, but the slightest breeze drives droplets into my face, so I tag him on the channel and ask the price. The channel explodes, Li Ri yelling holy cow, Na Wan confirming I am the big boss, Dang Qian jumping in to beg for a friend, add and offering a full banana battle robe free. Im Pung tells him to get lost and offers me a deluxe free if I accept his friend request. Dang Pung jabs that Dang Qian's begging was wasted, and I cut in to say I will add Im Pung but pass on the robe since I have a raincoat. Im Pung marvels at the raincoat too, then catches himself wondering why I still need an umbrella, so I tell him it is for fishing, and send a photo rod hanging over a vast misty lake, rain stippling the surface. Distant hills like ink wash, Dragon Ridge branches blurring at the frame's edge. The channel goes quiet, then floods, people exclaiming the big boss's fishing spot looks like a movie scene, that they are out surviving while I am not enjoying, that this is not fishing but cultivating immortality. The gap humiliating. Someone politely asks if I might sell some catch since their child has not had meat in days, and I explain I trekked 10 kilometers to reach this lake, and that if I am lucky I might sell a few. I accept friend requests from Dang Cheon and Im Pung, both greeting me at once, and Im Pung soon sends a wooden umbrella nicer than the ones he sells. Extra boards front and back like a little roof. I accept gratefully, telling him we will settle payment after I finish fishing. With 1 person and 1 rod, I really do have that ancient solitary angler in cold river snow ambience now, so I chew bread to fill my stomach while I wait, knowing 1 moment of distraction will cost me the float. The rule is simple, the rod always catches something, but the wait could be a minute or an hour. About 5 minutes in, the float dips, almost lost in the ripples, but I catch it. My heart tightens, my body leans forward, and I snap my wrist up, the rod arcing hard against a steady heavy pull. I tell myself this fish is not small, delighted as I feel the giant struggle below, and I ride out the rounds until the struggling weakens. Water sprays everywhere, and a shimmering finger-length minnow flies out, twists in the air, and slaps me square on the bridge of the nose, the promised giant reduced to something not even big enough to stick between my teeth. I drop it in the bucket and worried briefly about carrying a full haul home before snapping back to focus. I wipe my face and continue. My goal, a big crucian carp, plenty of time ahead. Fishing in this weather has its own charm, and I am starting to enjoy it, even imagining building a small wooden shed here on the shore later, since everyone is limited to 1 treehouse but a hut should still be allowed. This time the wait stretches a full 10 minutes before the float plunges straight under. Not a dip but a real strike, and I yank without overthinking, the fish flying clean out of the lake to flop on the grass before I scramble over to pin it. It is a real crucian carp, 7 or 8 tails, wild, and at 20 minutes in I already dare hope for bigger. I drop the carp in with the minnow, rebait and cast again, more patient now with 2 bites under my belt. The friend ping fires again, Han Sung, apparently with nothing better to do. She asks how it is going, telling me to head back if I have nothing so I do not catch another cold, and I thank her, say the haul is not ideal but I just started, then send a close-up photo to make the carp look impressive. She gasps that one of them must be at least 4 or 5 caddies, and I have to suppress a cough, since the fish is barely 7 or 8 tails and her gushing tells me my photography is doing too much work, so I just admit it is not that big and wish her well. After she signs off, I send the same photo to the channel as the day's first catch, and it draws a flood, people envying the lake and the rod, declaring I was clearly a qualified fisherman in another life, reserving fish in advance. I tell them we will see later and close the interface. In that window the float has already moved, and I lift the rod slowly, doubt flickering, because this is not the quick dip of a crucian carp but a continuous drifting sink, more like a different species or a snag. The tip has sunk 2 sections and is still going, so I set the hook hard, trusting my identity. The expected fight does not come, just wait and no struggle. And what surfaces is a dark branch. The misleading description makes more sense now, that I am promised to catch something, not a fish, and branches qualify, which is exactly why I am the angler who never returns empty-handed. I drag the branch ashore, rebait, cast again, and grumble that I would like a normal fish please. The rain holds steady and the lake ripples in layers. Then a familiar quacking reaches me from somewhere in the reeds, more than one bird. I perk up, follow the sound, and spot a flock of gray-brown ducks, grinning that if the fishing fails, a few ducks would do nicely, but the moment I move, they explode from the reeds and vanish. I sigh at how alert they are, but experience tells me wild ducks often mean wild duck eggs nearby. I pick through puddles and reed patches and find nothing. Then in the corner of my eye, I catch movement in the shallow water near the bank, a small greenish creature waving its claws, and my eyes light up, because crayfish is much tastier than fish in my book. I crouch, ease my right hand into the water, splay my fingers, reach for its back, and with a small splash, the unlucky thing is caught before it can react. I lift it out proudly and tell myself tonight we eat spicy crayfish. A good start, I think, tossing the crayfish into the bucket, thumb-sized and still green, a growth stage 1 before the molts turn them red. The float has not moved, so I keep crayfish hunting while I wait. Most along the coast sit too far out, but I scrape a few more together, and when I turn around, several have crawled onto the wet grass behind me, nearly invisible. The total reaches 8 in only 10 minutes. Barely a bowl, but enough for a taste. And I decide coming here today was the right call. As soon as I sit back, the float twitches, but it is only a minnow, the fisherman's nightmare like dace, a nest-stirring beast. Over 20 minutes, I land several more and finally change direction. The next wait is a full half hour, but the pull is much stronger, and I tell myself not to yank, and after a few minutes of wrestling, a bream surfaces, a big one. I drag it ashore and laugh at the size, at least 2 catties, the biggest fish of my life, the bamboo thankfully thick enough not to snap. I bait again with bread, and my luck holds for the next hour. More than 10 crucian carp at 7 or 8 tails each. Exhilarating. I do not chase crayfish for now, since the nearby patch is cleared and any new ones would pull me out of sight of the float. Time drifts and the hull grows. Crayfish, dead branches, water plants, everything imaginable. My identity today is neither particularly good nor bad. A step below the last 3, but it is precisely this one that lets me catch so many crayfish. At about 2:30, I start packing up, but the float twitches once more, so I decide one last try. As I lift slowly, a familiar feeling surges, and my heart sinks at the thought of another branch. But this one is heavier, so I raise it inch by inch. The outline sharpens into a box. My heart stirs at the thought of a treasure chest, and with a splash it surfaces, and it really is one. The system tells me it is a level 1 treasure chest, holding basic supplies with a small chance of rare resources, and I realize this identity was not meant for fishing fish at all. It was meant for fishing chests. I open it on the spot, since my backpack now has 40 slots. The chest gives me 3 things: a spatula set sturdy enough to be the essential tools for cooking, light soy sauce that enhances flavor, and oyster sauce that significantly boosts the deliciousness of dishes. I grin because the system has read my mind, since my fish and crayfish were going to lose half their flavor without proper tools. Now I can actually make spicy crayfish, so I pack up and head along the riverbank for more crayfish while there is still time. With the rain, they are easy to find, and the count keeps climbing as I mutter at each one, asking why one is hiding with its tail sticking out and telling another I am taking it home for a hot spring bath. The rain is lighter than this morning but steady, and I am too caught up to mind. By the time I stop, the bucket has at least 40 or 50 more, mostly green, but the quantity and freshness make up for it. 3 o'clock already, and the walk back will take 2 hours, so I have to move, since crayfish are not only rainy day catches, just easier when wet. I look at the bucket with a headache, at least 20 caddies of fish and crayfish, and the question is how to drag it through 2 hours of muddy road. I open the exchange hoping for something to lighten the load, but my eyes drift to the friends list and the idea clicks, so I message Hansung asking if she is around. She replies fast, asking what is up. On her end, she had just bought a bamboo pole hoping to fish like me, only to realize she had no line or hooks and was about to look for them in the exchange when my message arrived. I ask if she will trade me a favor for something delicious tonight. The plan is simple: teleport the bucket to her now, and she sends it back when I reach the treehouse, since live creatures cannot go in a backpack but can be gifted between friends. I only have 3 friends, and since Dang Qian and Impeng are still new, Hansung feels safer. She teases me, asking if the big shot really needs help from someone like her, and I tell her to skip the act and say yes or no. She drops it, tells me to spit it out, and I explain the lake is far, hard to carry, and if she holds them and sends them back, I will cook fish for her tonight. She replies in seconds saying no problem, she loves helping, but for the record she is not doing it for the fish. I laugh, send the whole bucket, and she accepts. On her side she is puzzled, thinking a few fish cannot possibly be hard to carry. When the bucket thuds down she freezes, because this is not a few fish, this is a full bucket. half of it crayfish. Then a fish kicks at the bottom and she notices more than a dozen crucian carp at about a caddy each. A bream over 2 caddies and a scatter of small fry absurdity rushing through her at the thought I might have cheated. She squats and pokes, a crayfish raises its pincers at her, and she swallows and resolves to ask me or exchange for some. Back at the lake, I nod as the bucket vanishes. I have already decided she will return them. Since as much of a foodie as she is also smart enough not to torch a useful partnership over one petty haul, since reliable mutual aid matters far more than fish that last one meal. If she stiffs me, I chalk it up as a lesson and move on. The muddy road shrinks without the burden, so I plan a small detour for wild peppercorns. My seasonings are now downright rich: cooking oil, salt, cumin powder, light soy sauce, oyster sauce, soon wild peppercorns, with only MSG missing. Tonight's menu is set: bream grilled, a crucian carp simmered into soup in a bamboo tube, a pan of spicy crayfish, with a small fry sold off in the channel since even a mosquito has meat. The thought of a feast plus side income keeps me smiling. While I am hurrying back, the second player to upgrade his treehouse appears, named Han Ryong, and the system makes no announcement this time, but he broadcasts on the World Channel himself with interior photos. To upgrade fast, he traded most of his supplies for iron blocks, the crystal already pulled from a chest on day 1, and everyone now sees what I described: locker and second floor. But sharp eyes catch a problem, that even though we are both at level 2, the points are very different. Mine 10,600 and his only 5,800, and the crowd chalks it up to a generous first upgrade reward, which is right. After 2.5 hours I make it back, picking some wildfire tongue pepper on the way. I find Han Sang, who hands the bucket back without a fuss, and I thank her and promise to treat her to fish later. She hesitates and asks if it could be crayfish instead, and I pause, smile, and tell her sure, because crayfish are easier than fish, and in this environment they are more a fresh taste treat than a hunger killer. But the flavor is what she wants. Without resting, I carry the bucket to the stream to clean the crayfish before 6, removing the intestinal tract since I am chasing a high-quality life, though half an hour is not enough for everything, so I only clean the crayfish and a few fish, and leave the rest whole for trading. Back at the treehouse, I start a fire while I work, building a small stone hearth for the iron pot, then head to the channel and post that I have freshly caught large crucian carp. For trade, private message for price, limited quantity, first come first served, with a photo. The replies swarm, someone asking if I really caught one, another shouting holy crap and demanding to be saved, another complaining fishing cannot be that easy, a self-styled veteran insisting from his years of experience the fish is less than a caddy, maybe 7 or 8 liang, though my photography is good. Another says 7 or 8 liang is plenty. Another laments the rain kept him in all day. And another counters that the rain flooded a ditch near him and washed up so much fish he does not even worry, setting off a chorus of envy. My private messages explode. Today I have 1 bream, 16 crucian carp, 8 white minnows, and 54 crayfish, and I keep 1 bream, 5 crucian carp, and the crayfish for myself, trading off the rest. The haul is solid, mostly wood and stone, plus iron and copper blocks, and everyday items like paper towels, resin, and sanitary pads. The trader of the pads even thinking I am a pervert, not realizing they are a wilderness artifact, useful for wound dressing, shoe insoles, water filters, kindling, and even masks. The crucian carp sell out within minutes, and the buyers cannot resist showing off in the channel and slipping in praise for me. One finally having fish soup tonight thanks to the big shot, another bragging his fish is still alive, a third lamenting he was too slow and only got minnows, a fourth envying the meat-eaters and vowing to go out tomorrow, no matter the rain. Others imitate me and start selling too, since as long as a player has a river or stream nearby, fish are not hard to get with a little courage and a simple trap. While the channel buzzes, I cook. The bream and 4 crucian carp go on the grill, the last crucian carp into a bamboo tube for soup, rice into another tube, half an hour out. The crayfish go into the new pot to christen it. Hot pot base finally earning its keep alongside oil, ginger, light soy sauce, oyster sauce, salt, cumin powder, plus a wildfire tongue pepper. And I tell myself only wheat juice is missing. Inside there is only burning wood and bubbling food, the soup simmering to milky white and rice aroma drifting out, and I feel life has real hope. The pot is hot, I pour oil, drop in the hot pot base, red oil melts fast, the fire tongue pepper releases a spicy aroma that shoots to the top of my head, sweeping the treehouse and drowning the char of the grilled fish in the freshness of the soup, until my stomach protests in its own way. That, I tell myself, is the taste. Half an hour later, everything is ready, and I send a crucian carp each to Dang Xian and Im Peng, who had pre-ordered when they heard I was fishing. I had added them as friends because they seemed decent, and today is a good day to include them. They are stunned by the grilled fish and try to trade, but I refuse, since they do not have anything I need right now and the gesture matters, both having offered me things for free before, and I do not want to look stingy. They take it gracefully and tell me to ask them for anything anytime, clearly determined to cling to me with the certainty that more spicy food is coming. Next, I send Hansung a grilled crucian carp and a bowl of crayfish, and she cries out in delight and thanks me a dozen times, while I just tell her to eat while it is hot. I turn to my own dinner: 2 grilled fish, a bream and a crucian carp, a bowl of crucian carp soup, and a pot of spicy crayfish. Outside, the wind and rain keep going, and inside, the aroma fills every corner. I sit alone and dig in. The spice of the crayfish, the richness of the soup, the crisp of the grilled fish, and the long-missed taste of rice braiding together in my mouth and doubling my happiness. Listening to the rain and scrolling the channel. Then I see the mineral scanner on the table and mutter that I forgot to take it with me, since I was exhausted last night and left it there. I drop it in the backpack to test tomorrow.